Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are exploring the 10 ox herding pictures, which is the closest thing that we have to date of a map for the stages of enlightenment that human beings go through. Now, what we've come to discover by reading this book that we've been reading for almost 200 episodes, the closing on the big 200, is that they may be lacking a few stages. Also, there may be some problems, some puzzles within philosophy itself that we may be able to uncover by taking what we've come to understand about the truth of reality in terms of the levels of reality and the different cognitive functions that are available for us to access and participate in and move through, and applying that truth to humanness. Those are the two aspects, truth and humanness. This book has helped us realize that when human beings interact with new truth, insight or understanding that challenges their current way of thinking, they reject it according to a similar model, a model of 5 stages of interpretation, going from rejecting the new to keep loyal to the old, to abandoning the old and accepting that new truth that you have accessed. So, given that, and given the book we've been reading, we've come to understand why human beings do that. A class of fundamental, unsuspected, false beliefs that we carry about ourselves from childhood, called the pathologos. That is the fundamental cause of all of our problems. Individually, therefore, the reason for our reincarnation is to address these false images of the self and reality that prevent our further spiritual development, causing us to have to reincarnate into this time and place, but also collectively as the forces that sow death and destruction across the world, causing mass injustice and leading to eventually the extinction of our species, are belief-based groups, or that individual pathologos that hasn't been reflected on and removed, venerated, celebrated as the highest ideal. It's not me that thinks my family beliefs are the best, thumbs down, it's God. It's not me that thinks that this false belief about justice I learnt from my upbringing is good. No, you have to think so too, because I'm a fascist dictator. Conservatives. And of course, capitalists don't have to don't have to go through any justification. They just have to lie to keep capitalism running, which is the tyrannical rule by those who have stolen all of the stuff. Capital holders, the billionaire Epstein class. So all human problems are when belief rules, either with conservatism, capitalism, and clergy, or within our own soul. And that's what we're addressing. How can we surface and purify ourselves from our own false beliefs? And as we've been learning, belief functions not neutrally. The idea that, beliefs are just harmless, like a cloud, is insane because people see and act and think through their beliefs. How many wars have been started in the name of belief? Well, all of them. Yes, all of them. Whichever one of those categories you are talking about. So, those belief, capitalism, clergy, and conservatism. So, we have come to understand for ourselves the definition of belief is a identity with the lesser of the self pairs. The building blocks of reality, whole and part, unlimited and limited. You accept a certain limit to be a part that functions in violent, savage, ignorant opposition to the whole. Why? Well, if you learn and develop, you're no longer in the belief tribe anymore. And of course, we've done a whole dialectic on this. Belief is necessary to convince people the bad goal is good. If you understand the good, you can't be tricked into seeking the bad goal. But if you're just believing someone else, you can. That's an unintelligible goal. Or belief is required to lie to people and convince them that these steps that are bad are actually good. So the goal or the steps leading to the goal. And of course we see within these groups that we mentioned, conservatives, capitalists, and clergy, they use expressions like just have faith, just have hope, just thoughts and prayers. Just believe me, bro. I'm the best at doing business, says the capitalist racists and stuff. So, given that we have, from reading this book, come to understand the nature of human ignorance and problems, we've also come to recognize for ourselves that it is a reflection of our excellence. Belief and image thinking are themselves a distorted shadow of knowing and understanding. Now, what's interesting about these two things is they're not to do with shapes and colors. Knowing is mind apprehending itself as the model of reality, containing within it all of the elements and forces and principles that we see manifested as adjectives in the physical world. So what does that mean? Well, that means the human purpose is to address your false beliefs that you learn and you bring with you from previous reincarnations. Cracking my back. To remove your problems. Everyone wants to remove their problems and use that freedom from problems to move into excellence, which is wisdom. To experience and understand, those are the two elements, experience and understanding, ousia and logos, to use the Greek words, the nature of your own mind. And because that is transpersonal, it's not a personal opinion or perspective or image, it's consciousness itself, and it has an eternal existence, being, we can personify those forces of those aspects of consciousness that are the objects of understanding. Dianoia is the Greek word for understanding this specifically. We can personify them with characters, and that's theology. Thems be the gods, the aspects, forces, and principles inherent within consciousness itself. That's the object, that's what we use when we think, by the way. You might not realize it. If you've ever wondered, every time I've thought about anything, I go through certain categories of distinctions. The first thing I recognize is that thing that I'm reaching for isn't me. It's something other than myself. The next thing I reach for is it as a one, separating it from the many. This stuff here I want to reach, not the many background objects. And then I look at it as a whole of parts. It's got its feetsies, it's got its wings. I recognize it's the same as this stuffy, but it's different because it's pink. And by the way, I do this with everything I've ever seen or thought about. Thems be the self-logos or the self-ers. Why? Well, logos is the name of those categories. And we call them self-ers because they have their own selfhood. So if you've ever wondered, where do these things come from? Is there a filing cabinet in the clouds? One with whole in it, and another one with part in it, and another one with same, another one with self and other, one and many? Well, it turns out, from what we've been reading, they are all aspects of intelligence. They all exist as a oneness. And because those categories are also beauty and justice, harmony, it is goodness. And because to experience it, we have to get rid of our false images and beliefs. And when we apprehend it, we recognize it as the truth of reality. So those are the words that we need to understand our purpose as human beings. And the book has pointed out, hey, there are certain keywords you need, like the word the. So if you don't have the word the, you will never seek what is transpersonal. You'll be stuck in the world of beliefs and opinions and drama and conflict. Because we want to recognize, hang on a second, there's a whole over there with this stuffy, a sameness over there because those stuffies are the same, a beautiful thing, a beautiful streamer. But what's the whole, the beautiful? You need the word the. Some languages don't have it, but that's okay. Add it in. Necessary. Don't have a word, you can't recognize it and you can't use it. So what we've also just, well, in that simple example, we've established that there are certain other keywords that are necessary that we don't have in English, so we have to add them in. Ousia, the capacity for mind to know itself. What we experience with the sixth sense or the eye of the soul. What we experience, ousia, mind turning around and knowing itself, that's that knowledge aspect of wisdom that goes along with understanding. Logos, the fact that it's understandable, that's logos. So those are the two big ones, ousia and logos. And it's our ability to participate in those things that make us more evolved than cabbages and cows. But we also need to say, well, how does that logos exist in ousia? Aspects. But aspects that have their own selfhood, that have their own power, that have their own force and function in their own way, that's eidos. And one of the great betrayals against our civilization is that we do not translate that as eidos, we translate it as forms, Plato's forms. Now, is that this one? No, that's fine. Hang on. I'm getting a bit of distortion on my mixer. Why is it doing that? I wonder. Anyway, ignore it. So, eidos. The word that means... Maybe if I turn this up here. How's that? That's better. No, it's not. It's not. All right. Maybe I'll just turn it down to my earphones. So, how do those understandable categories exist within ousia? Eidos. They're aspects that can be beheld with their own functioning power in life. Oneness. They're all onenesses. What else do we need? Oh, dianoia. So we can point to this kind of understanding whose object is mind, who makes use of the eidos. It's not understanding how many beans there are in China, it's understanding the model of understanding. Dianoia. And while we're at it, if we recognize that there are two aspects to wisdom, or our excellence, understanding it and experiencing it, we may as well give a name to that kind of knowing that's knowing this. Nous. And of course, all of this is to learn about the source. Because hey, as we pointed out, all of these things are a oneness, goodness, and truth, meaning there has to be a cause prior, one, good, and true, for there to be for us to use as adjectives, oneness, truth, and goodness. For this experience, there has to first be a higher principle, one true good. And as we say, each one of them is beauty itself, justice itself. That's what we're after, the self. And there has to be something experiencing even this peak experience. So we can take all of this understanding using these keywords and also recognizing that there is a structure of the logos. Why is it making those funny noises? Is it my... Okay, no, I'll try and ignore it. Maybe I'll take my earphones out. So, using all of this, we can ask the question, oh, that's interesting. If that's the truth of what is and how we perceive what is, how do we access it ourselves? How do we go from our participation in beliefs and images into, or ignorance, into nous and dianoia, or wisdom? And if even that isn't our ultimate goal, but our penultimate goal, second last, how do we go from the penultimate to the ultimate? The one, the good, the true self. That's why we need to have Socrates talking with Buddha, because the Zen Buddhist tradition have recognized in their work with helping people, helping students go through stages of enlightenment, have recognized there happens to be different stages. So we're adding the truth to the humanness. And also adding our understanding of why there's a difficulty just moving through truth. Our counterattacks from our false beliefs until we purify them from our soul or mind. So those 5 stages of interpretation we go through. And we've also come to learn why it's necessary to do dream analysis. Because those counterattacks from our false beliefs, we don't recognize because of our blind spots. And we don't recognize that we are projecting. To project what isn't there, or to be blind from what is there, that's the functioning of belief. Putting us in a kind of catch-22. Beliefs oppose understanding and knowing, oppose our good, oppose truth, oppose oneness, oppose self, oppose the eidos. That's the functioning of beliefs. It's the human sickness. But to purify beliefs, we need to participate in understanding. You can't believe yourself out of belief, but you can understand why you believe something, how that belief functions, how it may end, and in doing so you can free yourself via understanding from belief. The catch-22 is, if belief opposes understanding and understanding is necessary to remove beliefs, what do? Dream analysis. Therefore, we recognize, or as we've been reflecting on, that our dreams is some sort of communication from our ultimate goal, state of self, using that, so the ultimate, using the penultimate or mind to send us messages about our own level of development to excellence, or our perfection, and our purification, our problems and beliefs that we need to address and purify. So dream analysis is necessary. So we can take all of that into understanding the ox-herding pictures of Zen Buddhism. And in doing so, we've come to recognize that the first 2 stages are stages of ignorance, followed by a glimpse of mind, followed by 4 activity stages where we go through a purification of our false beliefs, and that activity that we are going through, dream analysis and philosophical midwifery is what it's called, leads to our own mastery of that activity, and finishes with a freedom of our problems, allowing a return, or that for the sake of which we've gone through these activities, a return to mind that we started our enlightenment journey with a glimpse of it, Or not necessarily, because, hey, there are some people who get into this via understanding, love of understanding. A glimpse can come later. But you return to that mind experience having benefited by having gone through that activity. So what are the benefits? The benefits of purification means you can purifying your false images and beliefs that are inconsistent. You can participate more fully in that experience. Perfection, in order to perfect understanding, you can go into that experience and recognize that inherent logos. That's understanding. You can understand what you're experiencing. But that understanding comes along with an art that we've been mastering, the art of dialectic or midwifery. So maybe with a fuller participation in mind, as well as recognizing the inherent logos or understandability, we can also, what's the dialectic? Questions and answers. Ask a question. What kind of questions? Questions about causes. We can ask a question about the cause. And what do we use for our answers? The principle of as above, so below, or analogy. So to ask a question about what might be the cause even of this experience, to answer it, we could wonder, how could this be a analogical reflection of what is higher? Because principle of likeness, the effect is like the cause. No, thumbs up. Actually, thumbs up actually. There we go. So that for the sake of which, a return into mind or the penultimate state of enlightenment in a fuller way, having purified what's false, having developed or perfected our understanding so we can recognize not the filing cabinets but the eidos or aspects, practice the art of asking questions and providing answers, the dialectic. And now allowing us to function in that in a higher way. Now, thankfully, Socrates gives us an understanding of what that might be. A union between the experience or the ousia and the logos. Our imagination and our understanding together. The very thing that we've been using in analogy. You have to use your imagination. Imagine this person. Imagine Apollo. Imagine Aphrodite. Imagine a cave. And apply understanding to it. So the activity of the activity of analogy that we've been using as we've been developing understanding reaches a kind of perfection or awakens a higher cognitive faculty that Socrates calls intuitive intelligence, or the eye of the soul, or awakening our divine character, because this relates to the gods, which are personifications of imagination that we can use to understand the eidos, or the aspects of mind. Sound fun? So we awaken a higher dimension of intelligence, having gone through those activity stages of enlightenment. So as a principle, to be in the game, if you have an enlightenment experience, keep working, keep reading, keep doing your dreams, keep talking with a midwife if you've got one in your life. Keep going. So what's interesting also about this is the ideas of perfection and purification. By purifying our false beliefs and images, we have come to see that they are in principle false. Meaning Not only are we purifying specific beliefs about ourselves, I'm not good enough, we are letting go of that cognitive function itself so that we can participate in a higher level of reality. Images have their source and object. Beliefs are about physical things. You can't have beliefs about knowing and understanding. They are beyond belief. Different cognitive function. So we end up starting with a glimpse as the first stage of enlightenment or third oxiding pictures, and going through a development of understanding via purification so that we can return having purified that cognitive function itself, allowing us to participate in a higher cognitive function called intuitive intelligence. Now, while that would help us with our midwifery, the sixth oxherding picture, sure, you'll be a better midwife, but that for the sake of which, or the final cause, has to come with a reason you've gone through it. That's what that for the sake of which means. In other words, we purify a lower cognitive function to be able to participate in a higher cognitive function that has a function that you can do something with, allowing you to participate on a higher quest. So we can ask the question, well, if that's not the end, why go through this middle stage that many people get stuck on? We see lots of people have a glimpse, the first stage, and then they start writing books and teaching courses on starting religions. That was Jesus' story. But even if they go through the activity of dream analysis and midwifery to purify their false beliefs, to return to a more full experience of that, you might think, well, this is me knowing myself completely at all points. This is the highest possible experience. This is me. This is the self. This is reality. This is that one that Socrates has been talking about. Parmenides has been talking about. There's a potential of getting stuck there. So why go through all that work just to potentially get stuck somewhere that isn't your ultimate goal? Well, thankfully we've realized that the method or the art that we're here to develop as human beings is the dialectic, which is just as Socrates left us at the end of the book. Jesus wasn't able to answer these questions, so Socrates is leaving them for us. What were the 2 points that he left that Jesus wasn't able to follow because of his own false beliefs that blocked him? The idea of causes, asking a question, hey, does everything have a cause? Must the cause be prior, superior, and independent from its effect? So even this peak experience has a cause. There's our question we can ask in that full participation in mind. And also there's another idea that you have to be very intelligent to accept without rejecting, the principle of as above, so below, or the principle of likeness. So the stages we go through to have this experience, we can use as analogy to wonder about how we then make our way to our ultimate goal. So we can learn from and out this as an analogy. Therefore, there should be some use of where we're at. And of course, yesterday we used the analogy, if you want to do calculus, you have to go through stages. You first have to learn the English language or the language of wherever you are. And then you do arithmetic class. If you don't know the same language as the arithmetic teacher, you can't do it. So the teacher will use what you do have, your English words and language, and show you how to organize what you have in a certain way that will allow for a higher cognitive function doing basic math. Then when you graduate year 1 of math, you go to your calculus class, and that teacher uses the language that you are now at, a higher level, the language of arithmetic, and shows you how to, or asks you questions so that you can yourself organize these ideas to participate in a higher kind of way you can do calculus. So, similarly, in the physical world, we have ignorance. Our beliefs, shapes and colors, image thinkings, the shiny shapes and colors that we think are good and beautiful, that draw us in, cause us to be stuck in our repeating cycles of failure. But you know what but then if we wonder why we're so attracted to those things, because we think they're real, we think they're true, we think they're beautiful, we think they're good, we think it's justice. So we do have some apprehension of those ideas intuitively that we apply to unjust things or non-beautiful things to cause our problems. Therefore, in these activity stages of addressing our problems, we can make use of our problems to encourage a reflection of what beauty actually is. By comparing it to your false images and what happens if you follow those false images, your problems in life, your repeating cycles of failure, or fantasies or distractions, or the dreams that you have that lead in you not reaching your goal. You can come to understand what is false, and in that process, come to become aware of something that must exist that you may never have thought about: beauty itself. What's the real thing that you have been stuck on as a false shadow of? If you've been relating to a beautiful, justice as adjectives, what is the noun? What's the substantive for the adjective? So that's what we make use of. That's why the catch-22 of human problems blocks our development of this, following the logos and mastering the dialectic. It opposes these things. It opposes our participation in a higher consciousness. But it's this very dialectic and logos we need to remove that block. So we're fucked. No, we're not. Because the activity of addressing your problems can make use of what shallow amount of ousia and logos you do have to keep your problems alive. Therefore, absolutely necessary for every human being in their development, evolutionary development, you could call it, evolving to higher cognitive functions, going from first dimensional sensation like a cabbage, second dimensional sensation and perception like a cow, third dimensional concepts like a human, giving rise to the possibility of false concepts, to a fourth dimensional intelligence. So you could call it your evolutionary purpose. You could call it the spiritual enlightenment development, true education. This is true education. So everything, a single activity that can unify all of these different ideas in a single activity of the meaning of life, or our purpose as human beings. What's necessary for that is dream analysis and philosophical midwifery. So what? So, if our job is to look at those stages from a glimpse into mind through the four activity stages, back to that state, that for the sake of which, with a fuller participation and a higher functioning, we can use all of that analogously to try and figure out what the next stages are. The movement from mind to self. From a glimpse to recognizing what you might have been identified with. Mind isn't really you. But to make use of those things that you do have access with, like the arithmetic student doing calculus now. Hey, by the way, this pure consciousness, is it beautiful? Is it just? Is it also harmonious? Is it the excellence of mind? Oh, interesting. But they're not separated. They're all together as a oneness. So what's our question? What must be its cause? Is there something like it that we can call one for it to cause oneness? So, we are hypothesizing a use of our higher cognitive function, a perception and understanding of consciousness itself, or the penultimate state of enlightenment, using those eidos, those aspects, those ideas that have an existence, to perfect our use of them. There's our understanding. Just as a midwife can make use of your problems to guide questions and answers in a friendly, systematic way, now we've got a higher kind of midwife who can use those things and guide your questions and answers about those things in a way that can perfect your understanding of their cause, perfect your understanding and art of asking those questions, and purify your identification with that stage of being. So ultimately, purifying itself, that cognitive function of intuitive intelligence, allowing for an even higher or fifth dimensional kind of intelligence whose object is the self. Starting from a glimpse, through these activity stages that reflect on what you have to purify, which is both a purification and a perfection, because you are, while you're purifying what you do carry, you necessarily are looking ahead at what the ideal is, the paradigm or the ultimate, your goal, as the paradigm used to guide your reflection. So that in theory, we can return back to that experience that some people without this development of understanding and purification might recognize, might be using that former language of mind, of experience, to make sense of. Remember how we said nous and dianoia, knowing and understanding, are not objects of image, thinking, and belief? That's why there's no need to save beliefs. When someone says, "Oh, but my dear grandma loves her Nazi beliefs or religious beliefs or MAGA beliefs." Surely it doesn't hurt her. It does. It fundamentally blocks her from participating in her own mind properly. And by the way, we all know that it's those very images and beliefs that fascists and conservatives and clergy manipulate to exploit people. That's why grifters always apply to the right wing. And right-wing fascists always appeal to religious people. And capitalists always side with those two. That's the Third Reich. The state and the church and the corporations coming together to lie and exploit people for their own personal profit or pathologos ignorance that they should be reflecting on. So, if you are someone who has been developing that language of consciousness or mind, metaphysics or philosophy, and with the personifications, theology, talking about this brilliant light of being experience and beauty itself and everything all at once and the whole of all parts and the same of all difference and the like of all unlike and the rest that contains the highest kind of motion, the infinity but also together, the unlimited and limited also together as a one. All of these things that are used to describe our peak experience, if you use that language to make sense of that which transcends experience, you might see how confusing it would be. You've gone from a fullness of experience to something that's beyond experience. So if this is the language that you've been developing through your spiritual development, both in addressing your false beliefs about what it ain't, facilitating a greater experience of what is true, mind. And if that's your language and you're experiencing something beyond experience, how might you describe it? You might say,
oh, fuck.
Oh, fuck. Right? You might do. You might say,
Hey, you can't say that to her. You show her some respect.
Sorry.
Die mad about it, bitch.
Yeah. You might say, this is empty. It's empty of all those qualities that I'm used to relating to. It's emptiness, or there's nothing here to be experienced. It's nothingness. If everything is emptiness or nothingness, then everything might be Maya, illusion, emptiness. It's all delusion. Which you might recognize as, well, some traditions use that language, don't they? Emptiness, nothingness, Maya, delusion. Nirvana is often talked about in this way. Those that have a glimpse of self without having gone through philosophical midwifery, dream analysis, and the kind of reading that we do here. And talking about it and writing your own books too. So the four aspects, which is the dialectic, four categories, the dialectic of the dialectic. Without going through the art of dialectic, you won't be able to, as Socrates says in the book, like a cow that trips over, you will utterly fail to make your passage from mind or the penultimate to self. From the eidos of the good. Now the English word for eidos is capital I, idea, so we can say the idea of the good, but I'd prefer to say eidos. The eidos of the good to the good self. Or good itself, if you find that easier to understand. Because only through understanding can we recognize the first 6 Enlightenment stages, from a glimpse to the purification of the lower cognitive function, beliefs and image thinking. Can we look at that and use that as an analogy to make sense of how the heck we're supposed to relate to nothingness? Or, as Socrates said in the book we're reading, sight seeing itself as sight. Let's see that in the book. Because even the peak experience of mind, there has to be something seeing it, or some sort of awareness of it. While mind itself you could describe with the greatest superlatives: beauty, justice, bliss, eternity, pure being. What words would you give to describe awareness that can have an awareness of that? Is it color? Does it have any color? Can it have any? If it's that which experiences things, can itself have any experience? In other words, if it was red already, then it wouldn't be able to experience the other colors properly, because you'd have this rose-tinted glasses on. The qualities of awareness would get in the way of you having awareness of all of the other qualities properly. So how would we describe it? Emptiness? Nothingness? Or we have to recognize there's a different use of language or a different use of understanding that applies specifically to this highest or ultimate state of being. Just as beliefs and images are to do with physical things, shapes and colors, ideas of authority, loyalty to people who resemble your parents, be they Trump or Hitler or Netanyahu, whoever you're a follower of, or your pastor or imam or preacher. There are literally millions of those people claiming authority who have people who follow along. That's a different object for our cognitive function. The eidos is the object for dianoia, or mind is the object for true understanding or true philosophy, which is why Stoicism, all of the popular ideas of philosophy on YouTube are so garbage. It uses the language of philosophy and strips away its proper object. Courage isn't following the logos so that you can come to apprehend and understand mind, which we call wisdom, that activity we call wisdom. No, courage is having a cold plunge and doing push-ups in the morning and eating a bull testicle.
Bull testicles. Bull testicles. I'm eating the testicles of this bull, and I'm eating it raw. Raw bull. This is buffalo balls.
Eating raw buffalo balls. Is that loud enough? Make it a bit louder.
Bull testicles. Bull testicles.
Right? Is what people think is philosophy. Keeps you in the world of ignorance. In a similar way, we have to recognize that the use of the selfers or use of the logos that applies to mind, different from problems and ignorance in the physical world, also doesn't apply to the self. What was I looking up in here? Not utterly fail. Oh, sight seeing itself. Sight. Space sight. Here we go. So, what we have come to discover in our work together, we can see reflected in the text we've been reading, which is important as well. The pull to oppose the new and resist change is a fundamental conservative impulse. So the definition of the conservative movement is to resist and oppose change and development to goodness, truth, and oneness. Mind, understanding, providence, all of the good things. As well as looking forward to meaningful change is its opposite movement. So what we are doing here, following the logos, would be the paradigm or model for the one true political party in principle. Not just for humans, any intelligent race that wants to survive and flourish has to develop understanding of problems to solve problems, and understanding of our excellence to be able to facilitate that reaching. Anything that opposes that, conservatism, has to go, or is a lower level of evolutionary development that has to be overcome if you want the species to survive. The issue between these forces, pathologos and logos, hinges on whether the proposals of each benefit the growth and development of the soul. So when we say, hang on a second, we demand a doctor to have knowing and understanding of the ideal body, and a mechanic of an engine, and a pilot of a plane, why do we let any old fascist, ignorant fuckhead with their own stupid beliefs become a politician? Or a religious official? Or a billionaire? What is their object that they must have to demonstrate understanding and knowing of to qualify for these jobs? that we've let the worst of our species qualify for. The growth and development of the soul. Because that's what they have rulership over, don't they? Making laws and policies that allow for that growth and development, harmonizing ourselves with the principles of reality for politicians. Literally telling you what happens to your soul, what you should be doing, and the meaning of life, and what is good and bad as religious authorities. And being able to block or facilitate that, the billionaires, with their weapons and their media apparatuses and all of the things they've used to spend their money on. So there's our model. What benefits the growth and development of the soul? And of course, while that's true for our society, that also is just so we can see it for ourselves. Whether or not the rest of humanity comes on board, that's out of our hands. But we can do our work ourselves in what time we have here. When it can be demonstrated that one is true and reflects a higher truth, the issue becomes critical. In this struggle over truth, it becomes necessary to say which of these comes closest to revealing and making intelligible the truth of the ideas being contested. When one can confirm what we have explored through a process of reasoning through words, there's our understanding, and appealing to the kind of experience, there's our usia and experience, those are the two things we use. Reasoning through words and appealing to the kind of experience that comes along with an encounter with the intelligence. There's our model for truth and justice, which we can recognize as, that penultimate state. So we've been talking about the cognitive functions of belief and image thinking being ignorance and the cause of human problems and are to do with the physical world, and have a small amount of usia and logos that we can make use of in midwifery and dream analysis to develop. And we said what we're developing into is a mastery of the activity of mind, which is understanding, or the dialectic understanding. Put understanding in there as well. The dialectic is, of course, what the art, and it's what benefits, so it's providential. So let's put in understanding as well. That's the dianoia. Or dianoia. And the divine, or mind, or consciousness, that's our capital K knowledge, or nous. There's our nous and dianoia. Whoops. Oh my goodness.
Die mad about it, bitch.
Calm down.
Jesus Christ, Emma.
Emma?
I'm too pure.
Okay. So, there's our standard of truth. What's false is the appeal to beliefs and images. That's the scam economy. That's all the people we mentioned who scam and cause death and destruction in our world and leading to Armageddon. But the object of truth is apprehended with a different cognitive function, reasoning through words, which is dianoia or understanding. That be the dialectic. Let's make this the same color so it's not so confusing. What color? This color. No, this color. And then this color. Yeah. There we go. So that's how we overcome our problems within our soul and within our species. Reasoning through words and appealing to the kind of experience that comes with a direct encounter with intelligence. That's this. That's our enlightenment experience. Penultimate. That's the first one. When reasoning brings with it a quietness of mind, so this is what we've been looking at now. This is what we're after. So now that we've gone from a glimpse of that pure intelligence, we've developed our reasoning through words along the way, perfecting the art of dialectic or midwifery, and purifying our belief in images, leading to a fuller participation in intelligence, allowing for our proper apprehension of truth. There's our model for our leaders within our race, any race. Therefore, there's another kind of development, which would be, I guess, those 4 activity stages where we go through that development of understanding in a higher way while purifying the lower. That kind of reasoning can bring with it a quietness of even mind, and one can drop everything away, even that peak experience, to see what sees. It is then that sight opens itself up to itself, the self. So here we have, in a fantastic wisdom bomb dropped on our asses by this fantastic masterpiece, a description of what we're after in our ultimate goal, the ultimate stage of enlightenment, the self. Dropping away even the mind through activity of development of reasoning to see what it is that's seeing anything, even mind. Pure awareness or awareness of awareness, sight of sight. And of course you can ask those questions, well, does it itself have a color? And you're coming to the conclusion that for you to be able to experience anything, even that greatest experience should have a cause, which of course is the kind of dialectic that Socrates tried to introduce to Jesus at the end of the book that Jesus was blocked from. Meaning, there needs to be some work in the meantime. And what this text seems to suggest is 2 kinds of work. Number 1, Socrates and Jesus a dream analysis and midwife talk in heaven to purify his false beliefs, allowing Jesus to go from his 3rd ox-herding picture, the first state of enlightenment, his glimpse, to return to this fullest participation in intelligence, the 6th stage of enlightenment, 8th ox-herding picture. But also, we need to have Socrates talking with Buddha to outline the missing stages of enlightenment that are analogous to what we went through, but applied to this. A kind of reasoning that can bring even a transcendence of mind, so that sight can see itself, can open itself up to seeing itself as the self. Equally, drowning oneself in empty phrases from whatever belief group you're associated with breeds chaos. So the most ignorant people have to repeat the same catchphrases. Liberal tears. There's only one gender. Jesus is Lord. Death to the infidels. The Jews are the chosen ones. Mormons have to wear magic underpants and do soaking.
Gooners.
Gooners.
I'm just asking for some gooner men.
And all she's asking for is some gooner men.
That's funny.
It is funny.
Spit on me.
Hey. Emma.
Gooners.
Gooners. So, in this simple section here, we have the description of the 3 stages of human development. Ignorance, where we drown ourselves in the empty phrases of our beliefs and images. The rising to truth, necessary to save our human race, because conservatism opposes truth, goodness, and development, the development of reason and understanding and empathy, constant wars, slavery, murder, torture for fun and profit. That's what this imitation through beliefs and images brings. But in order to solve that, in order to prevent that, we have to demonstrate what benefits the growth and development of the soul. That's our second stage, our participation in mind, which is transpersonal. You don't have to be on the right team. There is no teams. If you've got a mind, you're in. We're all in this game. That's how we're all the same. We all have minds. It can be misused and exploited, keeping us in ignorance, leading to Armageddon, or you can use it well, allowing you to solve problems caused by the conservative impulse and reach our excellence by reasoning through words and appealing to that direct experience of the intelligence. That's the truth with a capital T. That's the definition of truth. Now, the third stage, what we're dealing with now, is a kind of reasoning that can bring even a quietness of mind. Recognizing that even these peak experiences, so you've let go of the physical world, shapes and colors and gossip and all that stuff, no longer turns your head. Sixth oxiding picture. You're wondering about beauty and justice itself and imagining your peak experience or what it might be experienced in the waking life or in dreams, whatever way it came to you. But now you're starting to recognize even that cognitive function of imagination and understanding together, or direct experience of intelligence, and that kind of use of reasoning doesn't apply to what you want to find, which is the self. Transcending even eternal experience. So this section has all of those together. Therefore, any tradition that doesn't have the logos, the dialectic, to be able to recognize the difference between the two cognitive or the two enlightenment stages. Here. Self and mind. That doesn't have the necessary logos to recognize the stages of development. That doesn't have the correct names for the pathologos to understand what specifically are the 4 categories of personal false beliefs that we have to purify in order to return to mind in that full way. And any tradition that doesn't have the idea of pathologos to recognize that to apply, the dialectic, if you don't have the dialectic, you can't recognize that there are 4 activity stages leading to the self, allowing you to recognize that there are those 6 oxiding pictures is a glimpse, and the third, the 4, 5, 6, and 7th are all the 4 activities leading to the return in the 6th. And if you don't recognize that, you can't apply these terms and structure analogously, because the dialectic asks you a question about those terms and structure, about its cause, and to use what you do have analogously to find the higher. So if you don't have the logos and dialectic, you won't be able to recognize that the first 6 stages of enlightenment are to be used to figure out the next 6 to reach the self. And because the only tradition that has the logos and dialectic is the Hellenic tradition that was cut down at the knees by Emperor Justinian when he started Christianity and began the Dark Ages and murdered all of the good people, we can understand why Buddhism is missing those final stages to go from penultimate to ultimate. You need, in principle, all of these terms and structure to use them analogously, but you also need the key term pathologos, which we lost when we allow the worst, most ignorant people to run society and religion, and they of course killed the best of us, Socrates, demonstrating the human problem. Don't do it to yourself. Don't cut down your reading, don't cut down your insights, and if anyone is open to discuss these ideas with you, don't cut them down even though you might feel you want to. Recognize that, because this is just the truth, we also have to deal with the humanness. And recognize too that you will want to reject what you are hearing in these 5 kinds of ways. 4 activities leading to your ultimate goal where you don't reject it, you accept it. And equally so, you can recognize the 5 kinds of barbaric actions that you will use to allow for that rejection. You might ignore that person, you might mock them, you might threaten them, you might try and kick them out of the group, like Emma's majority report moderators kicked me out of the chat room there. Fascists.
They're completely lying to you.
Yeah.
They're completely lying.
That's what I'm trying to say, Emma. And then eventually kill. Recognize that these are the kinds of negative functions that will arise for you as a human in the human journey as you go through these 5, or don't get to killing. So these 4 activities leading to the ultimate negative as you go through the 4 activity stages of interpretation. Recognize that. So our question is, well, what is it that we are supposed to perfect? What's the higher kind of logos or reasoning? And what is the thing we have to purify? If we purify our false beliefs and image thinking that have these 4 representations that oppose all under the captain of the team, the 6th hypothesis, nihilism, materialism, Abrahamic, Zoroastrian, and isms, thinking that the model of understanding is something that we create and come together as a group under a some sort of created banner, Nazism, Marxism, socialism, whatever that, as the model of truth, opposing there being a true transpersonal objective model of truth that we should be getting under. That's how we actually overcome the conflict with the conservative impulse. We have to address these 4 categories of personal pathologos so that we're not blocked from this development. Therefore, what is it that blocks our seeing of the self? This 10th hypothesis, the one we had to add, the pathologos. So some sort of higher understanding of the principle of pathologos itself, not its examples. Not your personal pathologos, the idea of pathologos itself has to be understood and purified. According to this map. So that's what we purify. So we'll put a T here. Purify. And what we perfect is, just as we made use of our beliefs and image thinking to reflect on the truth of mind, so too, or the learning of English so you can do arithmetic, we want to use the arithmetic to do calculus, or make use of our new kind of cognitive function, having let go of any interest in people's opinions and beliefs and bullshit and gossip and any of that crap, shapes and colors crap. Now we're only interested in what we've been reading about, beauty and justice, the sorts of conversations that we've been reading about in the Balboa translations of Plato's dialogues, in the dialogues written by Dr. Pierre Grimes, and including this one. And maybe soon, the Balboa translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Those seem to be the 3 classes of texts that reflect the logos in the way that we're after. Truth. So we are hypothesizing that we are making use of this intuitive understanding of the eidos within knowledge to recognize that even that ain't true. Even that's you looking in a mirror. But looking in the mirror can serve a purpose to give you some insight about what you are, so long as you recognize that what you are isn't your reflection. You are better, you are higher, you have these qualities that you won't see in the mirror. You look in the mirror, you don't have intelligence in that 2-dimensional reflection. Will, and it's a bit distorted, your left hand is your right hand. So long as you don't take it literally, and you recognize that it's a lesser reflection of what you're after, you can learn by looking at yourself in the mirror, do your makeups or whatever. Similarly, by recognizing that what we thought was true in this most real experience, and our understanding of that, unifying this kind of understanding with that experience or imagination, isn't real, so we've got to purify ourselves from taking it literally, but use it to wonder about what it does reflect in the self. Beauty itself, justice itself, whole itself, part itself. What's the self? What's the ultimate principle or cause or axiom? But also, what in principle would oppose the knowing of self? Now, to remove our pathologos, we had to realize that these cognitive functions do not apply to knowing. So any belief you have about yourself or any image about yourself, even your mask that you wear to get by in public, even the image of yourself that stars in your dreams, even your persona, and even if you think it's real, doesn't apply. That's the purification in the second, third, fourth, and fifth stage of enlightenment. Fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh oxiding picture. Similarly, using that as an analogy, we would anticipate that this that we experience in the realm of mind or intuitive intelligence does not apply to the self. So not only can there be no image or belief about self, there can't even be a direct experience or knowing of self using direct experience. There can't be any experience of self, even the peak experience. Because fundamentally it's above that line. It's a different object, different cognitive function. So, going through a perfection of a higher kind of understanding, not the understanding to cross this line, but an understanding to cross this line, the second kind of dialectic. And by the way, you might see both mentioned in book 6 and 7 of Plato's Republic. In there somewhere, if you have a look. So the perfection of the second or higher kind of dialectic or use of understanding, that's why we need the oxiding pictures, because understanding is underneath knowing. But in terms of human development, it's above knowing and before. And to address every level. So if wisdom is this, but we want to develop an understanding to go beyond this, then philosophia, love of wisdom, these guys, is not as good as philodianoia, because there's a development of understanding to perfect our knowledge from oxiding picture 3 to 8, and then function with that, and then in oxiding 8 there's a unification of the two, and then a further higher kind of understanding to take that fourth dimensional intuitive intelligence and recognize that you can learn about the self, but ultimately you're going to have to drop that because the new object isn't of that kind. So by the way, we can see the great betrayal of philosophy by using the word forms to talk about the eidos. Forms is something that we see in the physical world with beliefs and images. It can't apply. Great betrayal. Plato's eidos, not form. So, having reached the fullness of this in the 8th, the 9th should be a glimpse into the self, and then followed by 4 activity stages, where we develop this kind of understanding to allow for a transition by purifying any identification with any experience, by understanding the principle of the pathologos that will oppose the knowing of self, but using what we do have to figure out what that higher kind of understanding and language might be of the self. So purifying even mind, gaining a mastery over the pathologos completely as a principle, which would require you to not just address your own pathologos, but well, to remove your own pathologos, you also have to function as a midwife to others at a similar level of development, but talk to lots of different people. And in each one of them, not just help them gain an insight into their own pathologos, but wonder about yourself, the idea of pathologos itself as a higher principle, axiom, or cause. So, a purification from any identification with this lower cognitive function, a mastery of the principle of pathologos, and a complete removal of that pathologos in principle. In doing that purification, learning or a perfection of a higher kind of understanding, and learning a different kind of language that specifically applies to self, culminating in that for the sake of which a more full, what were the ideas that we get? Find some space. Here's fine. So that for the sake of which, here's a big one. Up here somewhere. That for the sake of which, or the ultimate goal, or the goal, different color, or the goal after the activity stages. What do we say? A more full participation. Now, I know the word participation doesn't really apply because it implies you can take a part, and it's not really, it's a unification. So participation, but we'll use it for now. More full participation. A seeing of the inherent understanding or our intelligibility or inherent logos that you again, those who haven't done this development might have that experience of a self beyond experience and say it's nothingness or emptiness or everything is delusion. And we do see that a lot in Eastern spirituality. A unification of the two, of ousia and logos, or experience and understanding, into a higher, running out of space, higher. Drink some coffee, and here's a sound drop.
Funny and cool? Hey, leave some for the rest of us, man.
Oh, to be a man.
Honorable. Filled with honor. And he is walking that talk, man.
Why, thank you, sound drop.
I have a sickness for the thickness.
Why, thank you. Unification of both the experience and that development of understanding into a single higher what do we call it? Cognitive function, intelligence, higher dimension of intelligence. It's dimensional intelligence. And from that, a different color. As a result of all of this, this color. A higher functioning that can result. As a result of all of this. The difference between the first stage of enlightenment, the glimpse of the ox, number 3, and the 8th oxidizing picture, or the 6th stage of enlightenment. So, that's what we're after. Have we got enough to go on to wonder about what this higher kind of understanding might be that we're supposed to develop? Maybe. We have been working on that all the way through the 200 episodes, haven't we? Let's have a look. Oh, that noise usually means we're jumping into the text, but we are wondering before we jump into the text if we can use what we've been learning through the 100 and almost 200 episodes. If there's a new way of using the logos that we've been learning about and experiencing that would apply specifically to the self. Now, what clues do we have to go on? Well, first of all, we have thankfully, Socrates had a posse of people, and they tracked down Parmenides and they talked to him. And Parmenides says, Socrates, your problem is you're struggling to understand the realm of mind. The reason is you're using a language of the physical world, beliefs and images to make sense of this. Can't do that. And of course, that's the great betrayal against modern philosophy. They use physical language about eating bull testicles to talk about wisdom.
Bull testicles. Bull testicles.
Bull testicles. And they use the word forms to talk about the eidos. Same problem as Socrates had. He said you need to, in order to reach the truth, again, truth is at this level, you have to learn the dialectic. You have to apply the dialectic to the eidos, the aspects of knowing that we have been talking about. He says all of this in the introduction, and we have gone through the introduction on this channel a while ago. You can find that playlist on YouTube. But you also have to, at the same time, keep an eye out for the greatest danger. That is, even if you're talking to the greatest dialectician, dialectic, remember, definition, demonstration, division, and conclusion. It's the same as the structure of reality. It's the same as the structure of thought. It's the paradigm. Even if you're talking to the greatest dialectician in the world, it won't affect you. You won't benefit from it if you are carrying the false idea that you cannot know truth, which we can recognize on this map. The knowing, or the level of truth here, realm of mind. The knowing, that's our nous. Therefore, the kind of pathologos or false, oh my back, fuck me, I wish I could get a new mattress. I need to get a mattress sponsor or something, like other podcasts. If that's the state of knowing, he's saying you have to keep an eye out for the pathologos that opposes the idea of knowingness. Otherwise, you'll be blocked. So Parmenides is anticipating the first 6 enlightenment stages of Buddhism, where you have to not only learn and master this dialectic of understanding, but purify your pathologos. Now, what's interesting is, if these are the 4 categories of human ignorance, you could say, well, yeah, he's saying make sure you don't have the 6th one, the one that opposes knowing. But hang on a second, you know what else opposes knowing? The 7th. The people who think that the world is a battleground between the good team and the bad team. The religious idiots. Sorry, sadistic murderers. That think, oh, we have to kill the other team because they're not Christian, or they're not Jews, or they're not Mormons, or they're not whatever, Nazis. They don't think there's a knowable objective truth that we can all participate in that's necessary for our human excellence. They think we can't know anything. All our problems is just a matter of you're an innate sinner. You got sin. And you're the reason Jesus died. No, fuck that. Jesus died because of his own ignorance. Don't try and play the guilt bullshit on me to sell me your shit. So even that lower cognitive function opposes nous because it even opposes understanding. You don't solve problems through understanding, you solve it through mass murder, war, genocide, holy wars, a military-industrial complex, a slave society built by bankers and under capitalism. Not by understanding and helping people reflect. It opposes understanding, or dianoia, and it opposes care, providence. Because the way that human beings participate in providence is the dialectic. It opposes intelligent care. The most sadistic and cruel of all of the kinds of human problems. So it also opposes knowing. You know what else opposes knowing? Down here, the materialists and the reductionists. If they think everything is just chemicals and atoms, they oppose even a realm of mind. And of course, below that, the nihilists. The nihilists don't even think there's no mind that we can know. They don't even think there's a physical world, really. The black-pilled. Nihilist, there's nothing. So, Socrates' first philosophy teacher was saying, hey, your problem is you're trying to make sense of what we're talking about up here, using a language here, and they don't fit. They are different cognitive functions that have different objects. So you can say, well, hang on, how can this is a whole of all parts, or a same that includes all difference, or a like that includes all unlike? So we can see why, as a quick side note, you can see why this is the model for human society. Evolution has to provide a unity or a sameness to show how we're all alike, so we don't kill each other or fight each other to the death. But we also have to allow for genetic diversity and difference. We have to account for the greatest kind of sameness and the greatest kind of difference, because that's how evolution works. But here is Socrates saying, hang on a second, likeness the same as unlikeness? That's impossible. Because unlike means not like. So how the heck are you saying that these two can exist together in a kind of a way? And so, Parmenides and Zeno. Parmenides, the 60-year-old, and Zeno, his student who's 40, smiled and said, yeah, you got a good head for the game, son. And you seem genuine. Good head, good heart. We'll let you in on something. You're using the language of the lesser. You need to learn the language of the dialectic to recognize what we're talking about is a different object and a different cognitive function. And in doing so, you have to be on guard for any one of these pathologos that oppose the idea of knowing. Because even if you're talking to the greatest dialectic in the world, and he happened to be perhaps at that time, it won't change you. How many people come in and out of this stream? Get some truth bombs from the book we've been reading dropped on their asses, and they leave no different than when they came in. That's the humanness. So, outlining what we've been looking at in the first 6 stages of enlightenment. From a glimpse into that experience that Socrates perhaps had to get him so motivated to track down someone who can talk about it. Actually, Socrates does talk about it in the book we've been reading. He says, he doesn't talk about a glimpse. He talks about, as an example of someone who doesn't get into this via a glimpse of experience, but a love of understanding. He saw a harmony of music. So here I was in that seventh hypothesis, that objection to understanding, the most common in our age as well, and the most dangerous. Says Socrates, I was in that level. And because of that, because along with that means there's no meaning. Yeah, just let the religious and the fascists and the capitalists just kill everyone. Do the Epstein stuff and do the murdering stuff and triple tap a girls' primary school in Iran. There's no meaning. All we face is war, death, and dishonor. Because it's a view that holds that reality is a war between heaven and earth, between good and evil, which is eternal and unending. And that's the same conflict played out within our souls. All you can do is join the good team and maybe you get to go to heaven. And all the other people in the bad team, the non-believers in your specific pathologos ignorance belief, will go to hell. There's no role for meaning. No role for meaning or participation in logos. It's just in this eternal conflict, there's no escape. So the believers just condemn all those that oppose them. And I stayed with this early group, says Socrates, since there was no meaningful alternatives. He didn't have Twitch and YouTube. They find this channel. Then I was drawn to music. Speaking of which, I probably will be having a music stream after this today. So check me out to talk philosophy and listen to tunes there. I was drawn to music and I became interested in and later enchanted by it. I found myself attracted to those musicians who were able to capture a beauty that moved my soul. Here was a creation alive and present in the moment, only to disappear as fast as it came into being. Sounds like a kind of way of talking about something which is eternal that can, for a brief time, participate in the physical world. Here I could see that some musicians had reached over and were touched by something wondrous, and this they brought into being from somewhere unknown even to themselves. There, as I said to myself, must be something few want to acknowledge. Here was a beauty that I realized emerged from a structure that exhibited principles of harmony. Harmony, I hoped, was itself an analogical reflection of some higher existing order, the logos and intelligibility. Yet it might be dimly perceived, but nonetheless it was there to be participated in. There's our word participate again. It was impossible to carry the music away, yet its beauty lingered long after the last string had played, the afterglow. I knew then that since there is beautiful music, that beauty must foreshadow an intelligence to cultivate. You got to do some work. To do what? To bring yourself to match that higher order of beauty and harmony, or ousia and logos you've just had a glimpse of. There may be two intelligent forces, one glimpsed through music and another more profound waiting to be discovered. So, and then he talks about finding this beautiful woman who talked about the idea from Parmenides' teacher. The whole of God is seeing, hearing, and the whole of God sees, thinks, and it is the whole that hears. A question that can contemplate your own experience of the whole of mine. Caused me to turn about, do a 180, and wonder if I could carefully watch each thought and each thing that I say and hear. I wonder if I could discover what was experiencing those things. Surely after these questionings, I could see that what was doing these things was one, and not a warring God that drives a terrible fury within one's soul. Awakened, the name of the channel.
Jester Goon.
They're secretly turned on by it.
Awakened to learn more, I heard that Heraclitus had said, wisdom is one to know the intelligence by which all things are steered through all things. There's that knowing of the intelligence that we've been talking about. This idea of one, of the one, intrigued me. Ooh, he's referring to a one beyond that knows that intelligence. And I heard that Parmenides was to visit Athens. I knew what course I must by all means follow. He came with Zeno, and he led us through his idea, through which all became clear to me. For what else was left for me than to see as he saw? To see as his way of perceiving, his dimensional intelligence, his cognitive function. To realize what he had brought us to see. His method was...
I'm eating the testicles of this bull, and I'm eating it raw. Raw bull balls. This is raw buffalo balls.
That wasn't his method, that was the wrong button.
Anything for a click, no matter how stupid or demented or misleading.
Oh my goodness. His method was the dialectic. It's supposed to be a drum roll, but I forgot that I took the drum roll out. And that was enough for me to realize that to know the mind through the mind is to realize its very source. As for dreams, they played a major role in my life, but that came after I learned about Parmenides. Meaning, you need the dialectic to listen to your dreams without interpretation. And so I think later on in the book, he talks about leaving those old friends and relationships behind. So there's an example of Socrates without even a glimpse going through, well, maybe a glimpse, but becoming aware of his pathologos, becoming curious about the mind, the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking, the whole of consciousness, and the one that is even aware of that, through a love of understanding. Interesting that his pathologos was opposed to understanding, and he became a lover of understanding. So, Parmenides saying, hey, you have to go through the dialectic to be able to learn a different kind of use of words that applies to this experience while addressing your pathologos along the way, otherwise you will not reach truth. So, and that's what the dialectic is for. So what we recognize as, well, the reading and dialectic applied to our reading to reach truth, and the dialectic applied to our problems, midwifery, and dreams necessary for both. Socrates was quite a clever chap, and he said, well, that's interesting, this dialectic thing. Can you give me an example of that? No, it sounds a bit tricky. Can you give me an example? And instead of asking for any one of the eidos, can you give a dialectic on beauty or justice or sameness or likeness or excellence? He did a tricky trickster and said...
There's only two options at the end of an argument. One.
No, he said...
I'm looking for someone to share in...
No. Okay. No sound drop for what he said. He said...
They're secretly turned on by it.
Calm down, Emma.
Gooners.
He said, give me a dialectical example on the self. Clever kid. Which is what we're after. So we did end up getting these 8 hypotheses, these 8 different ways of viewing reality, because he did give the first hypothesis of the one self, led the youngest member of Socrates' crew through it. But at the end he said, by the way, now that we've defined oneself using language in this really particular way, that's the self that Socrates asked me to give a dialectic on. And young Aristoteles, the youngest member of the party, said that doesn't seem likely. Now we recognize that should young Aristoteles be at the level of the 8th oxherding picture, his objection to this self would be the pathologos, or a lack of understanding of the pathologos. That would be, therefore, the next 4 activity stages that, or rather, Parmenides would have to function as this higher dialectician to help Aristoteles make use of his intuitive insight into mind and address whatever was his specific, well, if he hasn't yet addressed his specific pathologos, but his specific pathologos and the pathologos itself, to remove whatever blocks Aristoteles had to accepting that first hypothesis. He didn't do it. Likely because he is completely unaware of the pathologos. He hasn't reached this level yet. He hasn't moved from beliefs and images to mind yet, and he hasn't done the work on his specific pathologos. To be able to talk about the principle of pathologos, or to be able to make use of his insight, he hasn't had insight yet. So instead, what Parmenides does is, you know what I'll do? I will completely outline the other 1, 2, 3, 4 views of reality and self that you could have, and the 4 that oppose it, giving you the complete set of other worldviews other than what I just described, to show you that none of them are likely. So your objection to what I said by saying the one self wasn't likely, well, you'll hopefully realize that it is, because all of these other options are themselves even more unlikely. Giving us this map that we've been using, and helping us see why we haven't got the 10th. Aristoteles wasn't ready. How does it help us? Well, what we're looking for is this activity. In the same way, Socrates' language of likeness and unlikeness being equal and opposite forces, just like his worldview, by the way, equal and opposite forces, good and evil. Socrates has yet to, fully address, while he might have left the groups of that worldview, he hasn't gone through his dream analysis and midwifery yet. So it's interesting that this worldview he is holding on to as his specific kind of belief and image thinking. So, as that use of the self-ers, the likeness itself, like, unlike, same, different, we call them the self-ers. His use of self-ers doesn't apply here. So too, we need to take someone from this level, higher level of truth, to the truth. Meaning the kind of language that we learn in the second hypothesis is different from the first, which means two things. Which means we can go back to the Balboa translation of Parmenides and learn all about this experience by going through the second hypothesis, but we can also have a look at the first hypothesis to discover what the unique use of the logos or the self-ers are that applies specifically to our ultimate goal of all intelligent life, the destiny of men, our purpose here, the self. Now, good news is we've done it already. We've got that playlist on the YouTubes. You can go through both the introduction and the first hypothesis. We didn't get into the second. It was a bit daunting. Took a break to do this other stuff. But in it, we recognize they use the logos, the same logos we've been recognizing, to understand the different cognitive functions. Image thinking is to reject the whole. Belief is to have your identity identified with a limited belief, at war with, savage, ignorant, sadistic, war with the whole. That's belief. Even dear old Aunt Betty, yes, even dear old, but she's a nice Christian. No, she's not. She's nice in spite of her beliefs. Her beliefs can get her to do horrible things. Even if it's her own children, or even if it's her own soul. The cognitive function of understanding is to have your state of mind as the whole, while relating providentially to parts. So there's our sixth ox-herding picture, the midwife. who reflects on the ideal whole and relating providentially to people going through their problems. And again, you won't seek a midwife or dream analysis dialectician to talk to unless you've recognized you've got a problem. That could be either after a glimpse of mind, to wake yourself up to something beyond this physical world. So you're not just here to accumulate monies and physical stuff and power, or running into a musician like Socrates did, or a philosopher like Socrates did as well. Someone who has a love of understanding. Knowing is the highest adjective, so there's our like and unlike together, the greatest kind of likeness that accounts for the greatest kind of unlikeness. That's the problem Socrates had, or the greatest whole of all of the parts. There's our unique use of language that's different from image thinking, which is there always is a line. They're always different. They're either different and at war, like a belief, like Socrates had, heaven and earth, heaven and hell, or they're different and disconnected, which is image thinking. Understanding is they're providentially connected. That's the dialectic we're learning. And knowing is they're unified as a oneness. The way that Parmenides describes the one self, same logos, same selfers, but hey, if the self is a pure one, by definition it can't be many, right? Because that wouldn't be a pure one. Yeah, of course, says young Aristotle. Therefore, can a one have parts? Aristotle says, why not? Aristoteles, young, little Aristotle. Well, aren't parts a many? You're right, many parts. So therefore, if you define a whole by a whole of all parts, like a whole puzzle that's been put together, all of the puzzle pieces are together, it can't be that kind of whole because it can't have parts. Which is saying two things if we're paying attention. Number one, there is a use of language that does not apply to the self, because you're losing all terms, which might help us make sense of those who have a glimpse of the first hypothesis, call it emptiness or nothingness. There's no whole and there's no parts. It's nirvana, emptiness, maya, which is a fancy word for delusion. Nothingness. But he also goes the other way. If that's a pure one that so therefore, if that's a pure one, can't be a whole of parts, then the self also can't have parts and can't be that kind of whole. Goes the other way. Hey, can the self ever be different from itself? No, then you wouldn't be yourself. That makes no sense. So the self can't be different. And if we define same, connected to different, like we do in experience, either in the two classes of ignorance that are blocked or opposed, or in knowing, which brings them both together, they're still connected. They're all defined by the opposite. If we define same by saying there's nothing different, everyone at the party is wearing the same shirt. How do we know? We look at every person and we see no one's wearing a different shirt. Then the self can't be different by definition, and it also can't be that kind of same. Therefore, the pure one we're after can't be same or different in that way. So, starting with the idea of self or the idea of one to define the other, ending up with the one self of the first hypothesis. And some people reading that would say, well, therefore, it's a deus negativa, the God that can only be described in negatives. Which is handy, because the nature of human problems is anything beyond your level you can dismiss by saying, unknowable. So if you're a religious person and you say, actually, you can understand Jesus' enlightenment experience and why he had problems. Unknowable. Just have faith. Or if you're a materialist, hey, don't you want to know where you came from and where you go after you die? Unknowable. We're just chemicals. So this is handy because the most challenging is the self. If this is the self-logos that we're after, a return to with the mastery of the self-logos, then our pathologos opposes most of all any logos or conversation about the self. And I've experienced this in real time. I talked with someone at this level once, and I thought it was a natural thing to talk about. I was unaware at the time that the pathologos is most opposed to the logos. So simple conversation about the nature of self will trigger everyone else's pathologos who hasn't done enough work on removing their pathologos. Something to keep in mind. So, the idea of it being beyond ineffable is the word they use. Can't be effed. I can't be effed learning about it. It's ineffable. Very handy. Handy out. But we've been doing something special, haven't we? We have been recognizing, hang on a second, if these are the fundamental building blocks of understanding and reality, you can't have experience unless you have self can't experience something unless, because self is having the experience, they need some experience. Experience has to be other than the self. Meaning there's two different ideas. But for there to be experience, self has to touch other, but they can't completely overlap because they're two different things. There must be something of other that's not the self, and there must be something that makes the self different from other. Otherwise, they would be overlapping. They'd be the same idea. These two stuffies. They're different stuffies. Now there are some things that are the same or overlap. They're both cute, they're both fluffy, but there has to be something about them that's different, otherwise they'd be the same thing. Their appearance or their participation in space and time. They can't occupy the same space at the same time. So we reckon, hang on a second, self and other, that might be the first way of dividing things, but you can also say, well, if the self is one, it's one self. Therefore, for there to be another, there has to be more than one thing or many. Hang on a second. We saw how one and many connected with wholes and parts. Parts were many, didn't we say a second ago? So we could also say, for there to be experience, there has to be a whole, and there has to be the idea of part. There has to be the idea of same and different. Which allowed us to recognize the different cognitive functions. Ignorance is in here, because they draw a line between the whole. Materialists and atheists say you can't know the whole of being or life or meaning or intelligence. We're just chemicals, or we're just small beings. So atheists, or strict dualists is its technical name. Even if there is a God, we are just ants. Believers are also there. The limit, accepting the limits of Mormonism or whatever religion. I use Mormonism because they're the most funny, because they have magic underneath.
They're like a goon. They're a gooner.
And they're a gooner. So we can recognize ignorance is a fundamentally in this section, part disconnected from or at war with the whole. The cognitive functions of belief and image thinking. But we said both understanding and knowing requires a whole of all parts, either in your state of mind, when you're functioning as through understanding to help those people down here make that transition through those first stages of enlightenment, or the ideal, the return in the sixth stage of enlightenment, the eighth ox-herding picture, the whole of all parts. Therefore, we have our first mastery of the activity of understanding or dialectic. The transition across this line. From, there's that thing there. I need to get rid of that thing there. Get rid of you. The transition from the fifth and fourth hypothesis, image, thinking, and belief, into knowing and understanding. That transition is depicted in the ox-herding pictures 3 through 8, starting from a glimpse, 4 activity causes reflecting the structure of the dialectic, and then return to that first cause in the final cause, but carrying all of those things we've been mentioning that makes it a goal, or that for the sake of which. If that's the case, if we can have, therefore, the third ox-herding picture in these 4, 5, 6, and 7, we can understand the functioning of 6 being the person who facilitates that, the dialectician, and the 8th into a full participation where we've unified ousia and logos, unified the experience with the understanding, which is that for the sake of which that we've been working on. By arranging these hypotheses in this diagram, we can gain insight into the missing ox-herding pictures. What they would be therefore some, what color? This one. So if these are the 6 stages of the first level of enlightenment, the next 6, or what we are calling the 6 lama, the 6 lama herding stages. I'm going to have to start putting llamas in my thumbnails now. Would start with a glimpse, or the first cause of self, and then 4 stages of activity, using not the physical world dealing with your images and beliefs, but using your newly awakened intuitive understanding, which is the intuitive intellect, or that 4th dimension. Purifying your attachment to those levels and gaining, this is our equivalent of the 6th ox-herding picture, a new kind of mastery to facilitate this movement. So there's our new understanding, resulting in the final cause, or that for the sake of which looks like not safe for work, but it's not, because that would be gooning.
Be a reasonable gooner.
And we need to be a reasonable gooner.
Goon, 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 goon.
Brain rot escalates.
That's fair comment. Which we are saying would be therefore the... what have we got on the board? A more full participation in self, seeing the inherent logos of self or self-logos, unifying whatever is the knowing and the understanding, the ousia and logos into a higher dimensional intelligence we're calling the 5th, allowing for a higher functioning as a result. What the hell does result mean? Result.
You've been a bad little girl and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now?
Calm down, Emma. I just missed one letter.
I'm going to get you. I'm going to find you. And I'm going to get you.
That's not deserved.
Like, literally, suck my dick, dude.
Oh my goodness, everyone's gone crazy. Which would be our understanding of our final stage of enlightenment. Or full participation, or a full participation in self. Seeing the inherent logos of self that we miss as a glimpse. So those who haven't gone through this process, we could predict would say, wow, it's empty of all qualities. Based on my language, the same problem Socrates had with knowing when he met Parmenides, so too, people who might be interested in spirituality, who lack the logos and dialectic, will have with a glimpse of that which is beyond experience, or the self. It's empty of qualities. What do you mean? There's no parts, and there's no whole of parts. Therefore, I'm going to live in the mountain with the bears, and because mountains with the bears, because nothing is real anyway. All of those things that can follow. Similar to the problem Jesus had. Because if he had, so those that maybe have a glimpse of the self and think it's emptiness because they don't have the right language, might think, well, that's it. Everything is nothing. I'm just going to sit in the house by myself or sit in the forest with the bears. Similar to Jesus, who had a glimpse, the first stage of mind, and then took that first stage, the third oxiding picture, as reality. Oh my God, I'm the next coming of Elijah. I'm the next king of the Jews. Blah, 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 all that stuff. All the things that caused his pathetic downfall. There is no magicking from the dead. There's no Easter. That was added 200 years later by the church. And that's, I've got a decent Bible that is actually included in Bibles. Tragic hero ends realizing that his problems were caused by his own beliefs that he didn't address, but too late. A pathetic hero doesn't even realize it at the end. But thankfully, Jesus is having this conversation with Socrates in heaven, and hopefully in the sequel that you are going to write so he can wake up, well, when you finish your book. So, we have to therefore learn. Okay, so we've got the first stage of enlightenment, SOE, which is the glimpse. Got the second, which is, and then we got the 4 activity stages, where we face our number 1, or so let's say the second, which is our problems. So 1 is the glimpse. Number 2 is reaching your problems, which is the first of the activities. Having some success, but also starting to understand that there is a source of problems. The 4th, which is the instrumental cause, the builder, the doer, the dialectician, being able to function. And the 5th is freedom from those problems, allowing the 6th stage, which is that for the sake of which, not safe for work, but that for the sake of which. Terrifically for safe work. There we go. Not safe for work, or terrifically for safe work, that for the sake of which. Which was saying a more full participation, a seeing of the inherent logos that you didn't see it to begin with, a unification of the ousia and logos, or the that understanding that you've been developing back to that experience, awakening a higher dimensional intelligence, and ultimately for a kind of functioning. As Billy finishes his house with the blueprints, builders, building, and bricks, he can function in a higher way. He can have a family. He can go to school, has a place to live. Can get a couple of cats if he's lucky. Higher functioning. So, clear from that messy board? So our question is, what is the specific use of the self-logos relating to this part? The higher dialectic, not the transition from beliefs and images to wisdom, but from wisdom to the self. What's the new use of language? And now while we looked at, let's just get rid of all of this big mess here. So while we looked at the way that we use whole and parts to deny both, it can't be a whole of parts. So anyone who's, whether you're in the physical world, all of your experience with wholes have been a whole of parts in the physical world, or whether you're experiencing mind, which is a whole of all parts, every time you've related to whole has been in relation to whole and parts, or let's just use a big delete. Or everything in your physical or spiritual experience, in experience itself, every time you've related to a whole has been in some sort of overlap with part. Therefore, if you define a whole puzzle or a whole pizza by no pizza missing, or the puzzle's got all its parts, so if you're defining whole in relation to parts, and also, what's a part? It's a part of a whole. You're defining part in relation to whole, then yes. Anything in your experience, either physically or spiritually, will not make sense to this area that's whole, that's the aspect of whole that isn't touched by part. So therefore we can understand why many Eastern spiritual people might end up calling this nothing, or emptiness, or the deus negativa, the God that can only be described with negatives. It's not part, it's not whole, it's not same, it's not this, it's not that. Therefore, if we were doing the next ox-herding pictures, if the 8th is the completion here, after the 3rd ox-herding picture glimpse, the 4 activity phases, that for the sake of which is the 8th, we could anticipate the 9th ox-herding picture as a result of that higher functioning. What was the higher functioning in the 8th? Being able to recognize the footsteps. What's the footsteps of the ox? The logos. The footsteps of not the ox, but the patriarchs or the ancients. The passageway. What we read in Socrates talking about. You'll utterly fail to achieve passageway without the... Oh, did we look at it today? That's my joke. Like a ox that trips over, you'll fall on your udders. That's my joke. That's not how you spell it. Utterly. Without the dialectic, which is the power of the logos, you will utterly fail to achieve the passage from the brilliant light of being to the good. Why? Necessarily, you need all of the logos that we've been using to figure this out. You can't just use experience because it's beyond experience. So you need Hermes, the dialectic. So we can understand that glimpse would be the 9th ox-herding picture. Just as you saw the source in the 3rd of mind, now you're seeing the source even of mind. Now, what do we need? We need a problem. Therefore, the 10th ox-herding picture that would be the 9th Lama picture. Or the 1st Lama picture, the glimpse. The next Lama picture would be a problem. Maybe that's where they're at. Now, that would be the difference, right? Those who say, oh, that's emptiness. Now I'm going to live in a cave with the bears and whatever. That would be the first. Those who might recognize that my way of making sense of the self as emptiness or maya delusion is flawed, and I recognize that as a problem, now you're in the second Lama picture. When you're starting to have the conversation we've been having today, starting to recognize there's an intelligibility of why you have your problems and that they're solvable, and you're starting to have some success, congratulations, you're in the third Lama picture. And if we add the 6 enlightenment stages from the Oxes, you're in the 9th level of enlightenment. Congratulations. If by your experience and participation in the kind of reflection that we've been doing today, you are learning to have this reflection yourself, congratulations, you're in the 4th Lama picture or the 10th stage of enlightenment. And that's what our question is. What would that be? What would be the kinds of questions or the kinds of use of language and understanding, the kinds of use of questions and answers and logos that facilitates that change? A dropping of this language and a learning of this language. The ideal of someone free from that lesser language that you would look to as that dialectician, reaching it, having purified yourself and perfected that understanding, congratulations, you're in the 5th Lama stage, Lama herding picture, plus the 6 Oxes. Wait, your 5th Lama plus you're in the 11th stage of enlightenment. So those are the 4 activities. The paradigm, cause, or the blueprints, the functioning or instrumental cause, using the Billy's house as the analogy, the builder, the activity that allows the builder to address the bricks, having some success in some activity called midwifery and dream analysis. 3rd, and finally, the person or the bricks that are building with, or the person who's recognized they have a problem, those that think that it's emptiness or ineffable or maya, they've got a problem that they don't recognize. When you recognize that, hang on a second, that doesn't sit well with me. My way of making sense of it isn't the right way. That's this one here. That's the bricks, or the material cause, or the open and receptive soul that can be worked on in the activity of dialectic. Now notice, Jesus didn't have that. He had his glimpse, made sense of it with his beliefs and images, caused this problem. It's a cautionary tale of belief. So we're starting to learn what it might look like to have a problem, using emptiness and these kinds of words as an example and not taking it literally. Also, we might be able to imagine what it'd be like to have a glimpse. Imagine going from the greatest experience possible to that which is purely beyond experience. Different from our physical world of problems and conflicts and time to a profoundly beautiful experience of bliss. This is going from bliss to no bliss. Might be profound, but it might be weird as fuck. What would it be like to have some success in assimilating yourself through this purification and perfection to what you just glimpsed? How do we do that? So it seems to rest on that activity. What is the activity of this dialectic in the orange? This transitional point here. A new use of the logos. So while Parmenides is saying, hey, if you define whole by a whole pizza or a whole puzzle piece, whole puzzle or whatever, if you define the greater relative to the lesser, then in that way, it's not that kind of a whole because it can't have parts. But we have, by putting it on this kind of Venn diagram, we've recognized that there is, let's go back up here. There is this section of the whole that is defined by a whole that transcends parts, which is what we got from the text when Socrates says, hey, back when I thought that we were disconnected from a higher state of being, that fifth hypothesis, image thinking, we are just ants, or we can't know. We are just chemicals or whatever. I realized that that's not literal, it was an analogical reflection of the self, because whatever the self must be, must transcend parts. Or whole defined by the section of the whole that's not touched by parts, or out of time that can never be in time, or at rest that can never be in motion, but the cause of motion. So not empty of motion, having it in a higher kind of transcendent way that it can function as its cause. That's the kind of logos we're after to make our transition from the ox pictures to the llama pictures. Which brings us to this diagram here. So here's our greater and lesser, self and other, one and many, whole and parts, in time, out of time and in time, rest and motion, that relate to these two circles. Where we are disconnected, the nature of human problems or ignorance. So this is the nature of all human problems or ignorance. What color? This one? Ignorance. And all human problems. There we go. Let's move it underneath. Space. There we go. Taking a pause to sit back and go, isn't it cool that we have a book we can read that can allow for an objective, true, verifiable, and useful understanding of all human problems? How many books define all human problems? Could this be the greatest book ever written? Could it?
The more holes, the better.
Right?
You are beautiful and everybody loves you, and you have the most beautiful breasts and the juiciest ass.
Oh my goodness.
I think it's awesome.
I also think it's awesome. So, that's the physical world of ignorance. That's down here. Just as wisdom isn't doing push-ups and eating bull testicles.
Bull testicles. Bull testicles.
It's not that. It is here. This is the love of wisdom that we see in philosophy, these two critters together. And what we are after is the new kind of dialectic that we are supposed to perfect to move into our ultimate stage of enlightenment, a kind of language that allows for this kind of movement, which would be a self that's not other, a one that's not many, a whole that's not parts. But as we've been saying, just as the arithmetic teacher has to make use of what you do have, English to teach you math, and the calculus teacher makes use of that, we can make use of everything we've experienced in the physical world and everything we've learnt about our ignorance and problems and the injustice of the human condition at this stage of development, all of the fascist capitalists, religious clergy and conservatives, all of our own individual problems, all of the problems faced in our dreams and relationships, all of that we can bring together, as well as all of our experience in the realm of mind or pure being, mind or being, bring both of those together by saying it's not those kinds of wholes or those kinds of parts disconnected from wholes in our problem. It's none of these problems. It's not in the realm of problems, parts disconnected or in violent opposition to the whole. Human ignorance. Not that. And even in your inside experiences, even the good people who love understanding, or even your insightful experiences of knowing, it's not that. Any experience from this realm of the physical and into the realm of mind is less than and different from, but somehow contained within, in a higher transcendent causal way, what we are after in knowing the self. So in that way, you can use it as a deus negativa, or negatively the God that you can describe using negatives or purification of your prior states of being. But really, it's not the deus negativa, because we do have a language, we're just using it differently. Like every one of these 1, 2, 3, 4 activity causes, they're all cognitive functions that are different with different objects and different functionings. So too, the logos of self, or chronos, is different. And the knowing of self, or Uranos, ousia, is different. So therefore, we can anticipate the first stage of Lama enlightenment, a glimpse into the ousia, or experience of self. The activity stages would be a development of the understanding of self through a purification of the lower cognitive functions of anything in mind or experience. Although you've got rid of this already, so we're halfway there. Using your insightful experiences to make this transitional process, leading to ultimately some sort of unity of the knowing and showing of self, the model and activity to know and show the self, because you've had to develop that dialectical functioning to help people move up. But also, hey, this use of understanding to make this transition allowed you to help yourself and your friends, but also allowed for a higher functioning when you had a full participation in a higher way. In other words, to move from mind to self. So we can wonder what happens when we complete the Lama herding pictures, catch that Lama, and we unify ousia and logos of self. What is that self going to use that for that's beyond even self? That's a difficult question to wonder about, because it would be a completely different, not reset, kind of like a reset, completely different kettle of fish, completely different terms. All of the terms that you've learned from physical and mind experience and understanding, it's not up here. Is there something greater than whole? Or greater than one, or greater than self? I don't know. But there's that language we've been looking for. There's the language that we've been looking for, and the principle of the ox herding pictures, or the principle of the Lama herding pictures. So our next job is to take everything we've just outlined on what would be the next 6 stages of enlightenment. How do we do it? By taking the hypotheses of Parmenides, the greatest work of philosophy to date, completing that puzzle. Also, there's the other puzzle, like this helps us. Our big question is, if there's only one first hypothesis, where's the ousia and logos? So we've got a tentative hypothesis on how to answer that at the end of the llama pictures. But then it raises another question. What would that higher activity be? Whoa, holy shit. That's a fucking question and a half. So we've given birth to an even deeper question. So by completing the hypotheses, adding the pathologos, and applying it to the stages of human development, or adding truth to humanness, we have given birth to how to use the dialectic, or questions about causes and answers through analogies, to look at the analogical, or to take the first 6 stages of enlightenment from the Oxherding pictures and use them analogically to determine the next 6, or the Lama pictures, which would complete, just as we've added more completion to the greatest work of philosophy, we can add more completion to the greatest work of Eastern spirituality. The closest thing to a map or logos of spiritual development. Hooray for us! Worth doing? Yes.
I have a sickness for the thickness.
We have the sickness for thickness too.
And she spit on him also.
Hey, calm down, you goon.
Goon, 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 goon.
Goon, goon, goon.
Goon, 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 goon.
Okay, enough gooning. You wacky soundboard characters.
Gooner.
The more holes, the better.
You are a gooner.
Goon,
too.
goon, 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 goon.
So, pretty cool? Worth doing? This is why I have so many followers on YouTube and Twitch. Completing or adding completion to the highest work of philosophy and adding completion to the highest work of spirituality. That's why I have the 50,000 viewers like Hassan, Piker, and Asmongold on Twitch also. And making the bucks. With all my ad revenue. Not yet. Not made any money yet, but who knows if they play LeBron James, $60 million for slam dunks. Maybe one day philosophers will be able to buy a house or something and get paid money. Who knows? But who cares? This is a kind of learning that we can take with us beyond this physical lifetime. Because it's eternally true. This map will be true for any species in any galaxy, in any dimension, etc. It's a win-win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
That's right. So, if those would be the next 6, so doing just what we described, allowing us to map out the next 6 stages of enlightenment, or the Lama pictures, we have to ask the question, hey, by the way, the Oxherding pictures only had those first 8. And now we know why that must be the case. But as the legend goes, someone had an encounter maybe with a philosopher in their life and posited 2 higher stages than was within the Buddhist tradition. So the story goes. And with our understanding of the necessity for the logos, the dialectic, as Socrates says, to make that passageway, otherwise you'll trip on your utters, and having the key term of pathologos, so you can purify it, and a logos of metaphysics, so you can utilize it to perfect your understanding, rise to a higher level of functioning, and let go of the lower, you won't be able to make that transition. So the 9th and 10th Oxherding pictures was added later. Now I don't know the complete history of this, but I've heard whisperings about maybe someone running into a philosopher and adding one extra stage and then another extra stage. Suffice it to say, we can understand why they don't have that next stage, which is why you're being asked to, by this author, to write Socrates and Socrates and Buddha, not Socrates and Jesus, Socrates and Buddha, a talk in heaven. This can be what they talk about in your book you're being asked to write. allowing you to be Hellenic. So as we said, there are 4 uses of the dialectic. Reading, which is what you're doing. Hey, in order to write these sequels, you need to be doing some midwifery to know what that talk with Jesus will be about, and doing your own dream analysis. But also in writing that book, you're writing your own dialogues, giving you the 1, 2, 3, 4 aspects of what it means to be Hellenic. So not just, this book doesn't just define the meaning of life, it gives you the invitation and tools to fulfill the meaning of life, making it, some are saying, the greatest fucking book ever written. Holy fuck beans.
I would scoop the moon in a cup for you.
For this book, as we scoop the moon in a cup.
If you don't know, now you know.
And now you know, Emma.
I'm too pure.
That's right. Now we can be pure, right?
That one's perfect and exactly the case.
I thought so. So, let's take those 6 hypotheses of the llama pictures and apply it to the 2 extra ox-herding pictures after the union of Oxman and Whip together in the 8th, and see which of them they have, or if our theory is correct, they won't have as part of their tradition, but maybe they've experienced someone acting like this. So they might have a less of a complete or less accurate description. And let's see which of the 6 that they have in there too. Sound fun? Yes, balloons. Sound fun?
I'm eating the testicles of this
You and
bull, and I'm eating it raw. Bull testicles. Bull testicles.
Bull testicles.
First, you're saying the F word or whatever you said. Now the tone is completely out of control.
Sorry about my out of control tone. Emma?
Freaks.
I know. So let's get into that. Let's read those 2 ox-herding pictures. Let's jump into that now. All right, let's go. So which of these 6 that we have hypothesized do we see in the last 2 ox-herding pictures of Buddhism? And do we see anything, do we see any differences in the way that they are outlined compared to what we've seen formerly that might indicate it may not be a big part of the tradition? Maybe something they have anticipated or glimpsed or seen in another person. Now we've been looking for what's encountered, the state of mind, how it functions, and whether it anticipates a sequel. Can we see that in these last 2? Reaching the source. Too many steps. So, title seems to be what we're after. Too many steps have been taken, returning to the root and source. Better to have been blind and deaf from the beginning! ! Dwelling in one's true abode, unconcerned with and without. The river flows tranquilly on and the flowers are red. Returning to the source. From the very beginning there has not been so much as a speck of dust to mar the intrinsic purity. So, language of purity, language of source, seems to be what we're after. And the not the bright, shiny brilliance of mind, but the clear, pure transcendence of self. He observes the waxing and waning of life in the world while abiding unassertively in a state of unshakable serenity. How does this relate to the glimpse? First glimpse of the ox, if he will but listen intently to everyday sounds, he will come to the realization that at that instant see the very source. So it's about a seeing and a realization. The six senses are no different from this true source. So I transition from regular senses to a different kind of sense. So this is the transitioning from the physical senses to our mind itself, or the ousia, or nous. In every activity, the source is manifestly present. It is analogous to the salt in water or the binder in paint. When the inner vision is properly focused, one comes to realize that that which is seen is identical with the true source. Inner vision. A nightingale warbles on a twig. The sun shines on undiluted willows. There stands the ox. Where could he hide? What splendid head and stately horns, what artist could portray them? So it is describing a transition through a realization in the instant, or the gap between each moment, as we described in the third hypothesis, and a seeing of the source and awakening of a higher sense. Is this like that? Or is it more like, well, we know the other ones. Is it more like problem? He observes the waxing and waning of life in the world while abiding unassertively in a state of unshakable serenity. This waxing and waning is no phantom or illusion, but a manifestation of the source. Is he seeing the source? Why then is there a need to strive for anything? The waters are blue, the mountains are green. Alone with himself, he observes things endlessly changing. He has returned to the origin, come back to the source, but his steps have been taken in vain. It is as though he were now blind and deaf, seated in his hut. He hankers not for things outside. Streams meander on of themselves. Red flowers naturally bloom red. Is this a description of what it's like to go through the passageway of the fire or the light of 8 and get a glimpse in source? Or is it describing a problem that happens as a result of misunderstanding it? What did we say? Like Jesus having a glimpse and making sense of a glimpse of mind and making sense of it with his beliefs. Similarly, on a higher level, to cause his problems that he played out tragically or pathetically. So similarly, someone without the language of the dialectic and logos, learning how to use words in the way that we've just discovered by looking at the hypotheses, the first hypotheses, and understanding it the way we did, with the little Venn diagram. What do we say? We said they might go away and live in the forest with the bears. Everything is emptiness. Everything is nothingness. I'm unconcerned. Things go on. It's all from source, but it's all illusion. Well, there's no phantom or illusion. No, it's not phantom or illusion, but a manifestation of source. But why then is there a need to strive for anything? Why have gone through this process? Why strive? It's like his steps have been taken in vain. His steps have been taken in vain. There's no that for the sake of which. The activity steps or activity stages are in vain. There's no payoff. But he has seen that there is a waxing and waning that is a manifestation of source. So while we described the first glimpse, then we have the problem, stubborn and unbridled, breaking of old habits, inexhaustible will and power of the struggle. But then when we start to have some success in the fifth ox-herding picture, we see that even the thoughts that we have of our pathologos are not unreal, since they arise from our true nature. It's only delusion that makes it think that they're not real. So we see that there is a source behind our problems and a communication from a divine about our problems that we have to that allowing us to participate in providence through dialectic and midwifery. It sounds like this ninth ox-herding picture is a combination of the first glimpse of the source, the root and the source, the problem better to be blind and deaf from the beginning, but also recognizing that there is an intelligibility behind those problems, or the logos. Unshakable serenity. This waxing and waning of the world, the flowing of the self-logos, isn't a phantom or illusion, but a manifestation of source. So it sounds like he's gone from everything is nothingness, why do anything, what was the point of everything, might as well be blind and deaf, to, oh yeah, there is a source behind what's going on around me. The seeing of the source of our images was the fifth ox-herding picture, or the second activity. Is this the 3, 4, and 5 together? Why then need to strive? Oh, back to 4, back to the problem. The waters are blue, the mountains are green. Alone with himself, he observes things endlessly changing. Is that the problem? Feeling alone? Is that the 4? He has returned to the origin, come back to the source. Is this the experience of the source or a consequence of returning to the origin? But his steps have been taken in vain. Sounds like the problem. It is as though he were now blind and deaf. Seated in his hut, he hankers not for things outside. Streams neander on of themselves. Red flowers naturally bloom red. Well, the problem in 4 is when you're struggling to tame the ox. He's not struggling. So maybe this is a description of the consequences of the glimpse of source. You think you're there, just as the consequence of the glimpse of the source of mind. We see many people in our world and in the past, including Jesus, having that problem. I keep using Edgar Tolle as the example, someone who had a glimpse and then developed a following and wrote books and gave talks and stuff. Is this the consequence of the glimpse? Is it a problem if he's not struggling to tame the ox? Is it a problem if he hasn't recognized the problem? Which one is this? No more cookies. Keep reading. The last one that we have. Which one is this one? Return to society barefooted and naked of breast. Hey, where's that drop about being breasts? This is the ox-herding picture that is...
You are beautiful and everybody loves you, and you have the most beautiful breasts and the juiciest ass.
Oh my goodness!
Drop the attitude, man.
Sorry about my attitude.
I think it's so awesome.
Oh,
Now we're getting into extreme Jordan Peterson levels of whimsy.
we are. So, barefoot and naked of breast, however beautiful they may be, I mingle with the people of the world. My clothes are ragged and dust-laden, and I am ever blissful. I use no magic to extend my life. Now before me, the dead trees become alive. Entering the marketplace with helping hands, the gate of his cottage is closed, and even the wisest cannot find him. His mental panorama has finally disappeared. Wait a minute. The stages of accepting you're an adorable human.
I have a sickness for the thickness.
We have a sickness for the thickness.
Spit on me.
Emma! Emma, we will not spit on you, Emma.
Goons of gooners.
Goon, 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 goon.
Too much gooning, Emma. Entering the marketplace with helping hands. The gates of the cottage is closed, and even the wisest cannot find him. His mental panorama has finally disappeared. He goes his own way, making no attempt to follow the steps of the earlier sages. Carrying a gourd, he strolls into the market. Leaning on his staff, he returns home. He leads innkeepers and fishmongers in the way of the Buddha. The Buddha. Bare-chested. I'm not going to play that drop again. Stop being a gooner.
Gooner.
Barefooted and bare-chested, he comes into the marketplace. Muddied and dust-covered, how broadly he grins. Without recourse to mystic powers, withered trees he swiftly brings to blossom. Except you're unique, you're adorable. Put step 1 and 2 together for step 4. Are the best accepted. Why is it censored? Who's censoring my chatters? What was it? What was it? Who is the best? What did you say? What was censored in number 4? Did you say a bad word?
What the hell kind of a show is this? What is this, the comedy mothership?
This isn't the comedy mothership, you know.
You're a little bitch-ass baby.
Oh my goodness, did you say that in the chat? I can't say bitch-ass baby in my chat. You are the best accepted. Huh? Yes. So, what do we have here? Mingle with the people of the world. Is that the 6th ox or 6th llama? Are we engaged in a dialectic that can relate to anyone? The high kind of dialectic? Clothes are ragged and dust laden. I am ever blissful. What does that mean? Marketplace with helping hands. It does seem like the activity section or the instrumental cause. The gates of the cottage is closed, and even the wisest cannot find him. His mental, what does that mean? His mental panorama has finally disappeared. See, that seems like the ideal. Just a reminder, we've got we've got 6 stages that we're looking for. We're trying to place 9 and 10 within these 6 stages. The first stage is a glimpse of a high level of being, a glimpse of self. The next would be a recognition of your problems to do with self, having to do some work, purifying false or purifying pathologos itself, and developing, well, struggling with that, having some success purifying your false ideas of self and aligning yourself with that glimpse, being able to function in that dialectical way, in the dialectics that we mentioned already today. The higher paradigm. So we've got the paradigm of someone free of their problems that oppose the self, free of pathologos and mastery of pathologos. The functioning. So the paradigm, the instrumental, the mean or the transition, and what allows for the transition, the intelligibility, and the problem. And then a return. A return with a higher functioning. Well, this number 10, his mental panorama has finally disappeared. That sounds like the paradigm, the ideal. Free even from attachment to mind. Intuitive intelligence transcended to the 5th dimensional kind. He goes his own way, making no attempt to follow the steps of the earlier stages. Sounds like completion. Carrying a gourd, he strolls into the marketplace. Leading on a staff, he returns home, and he leads innkeepers and fishmongers in the way of the Buddha. That sounds like the instrumental. Barefooted and bare-chested, he comes into the marketplace. Muddied and dust-covered, how broadly he grins. Without mystic powers, he withered trees he swiftly brings to blossom. It sounds like these are the next two, the activity and the ideal in one. Whereas the ninth oxiding picture sounds like the glimpse, the problem, and some success in one. What are we missing? That for the sake of which. Because in the return to mind, there's an activity that isn't to do with helping others. That's the instrumental cause. The builder, the dialectician, in number 6, the higher functioning is for yourself. To be able to follow the footprints through to the next level. So what have we got? We've got a description of the problem as a result of the glimpse. What are we lacking? A description of the glimpse. What was described in 3 and 8 we don't have here. This isn't a realization. This is a consequence after the realization. Which lends to our theory, this isn't of these 2 extra oxiding pictures that weren't always in here, that were added much later, are not of Eastern spirituality, justifying or in alignment with what Socrates says, you won't find passage, you will utterly fail like a cow that trips over. My one joke that I have. To find passage from the 8th or the eidos or the beholding of the good to the good itself without Hermes or the dialectic. And as every tradition other than the Socratic philosophy or true philosophy or the Hellenic, any tradition that lacks Homeric midwifery, any tradition that lacks Parmenidean dialectic applied to dreams as Socrates outlined, will fail at that transition. Therefore, if their tradition lacks the logos and the dialectic, a description of that glimpse won't be part of their tradition. They can't describe what it's like to transition through that light to glimpse the self. They can observe the consequences of someone who've glimpsed emptiness or nirvana, using their language, using their lesser language to describe the greater. What the hell was the point of all that? Nothing is anything. It's all pointless. It's all just illusion anyway. There's not even an ultimate goal at the end of all this. Might as well have been deaf and blind from the beginning. Because what I encountered wasn't I went through bliss. Whatever my training, some people like some traditions say that, every experience, even bliss isn't true enlightenment. So even in that, whatever training or effort I've done in that tradition allowed me to let go of even that experience of mind. But without a logos, nothing. I might as well have been deaf and blind. What was all that work for? All that ignorance, however many reincarnations, living a life of ignorance and suffering until this. A description of what it looks like which is what these oxiding pictures are essentially, of someone as a result of the glimpse, without the glimpse stage. will that be? Stage 2 of enlightenment? Or the 4th oxiding picture? Struggling with your old habits, your old beliefs, your old ways of making sense of things? Knowing without showing the self is a problem. To know and show the self is the goal. Seated in your hut. Enlightenment isn't real. What do you mean? We've been spending so long understanding the 12 stages of enlightenment. Oh, are you saying that someone without the understanding might misunderstand that highest experience and recognition of self and come to the false conclusion that enlightenment isn't real? I don't think that's the way he's describing it here in the 9th. He's recognizing that he's returned home. He can recognize that everything is a manifestation of source. And he's gone back to the origin, but he's saying, what was the point of all of those steps along the way? Going through the human journey of ignorance into enlightenment and going through enlightenment to even the ultimate enlightenment. From the penultimate to the enlightenment. Sounds like it's a description of someone after a glimpse, in a problem, seems to be kind of between 1 and 2, isn't it? It's not a description of the actual state, what you encounter in self, but it's not a description of someone struggling with their problems. It sounds like someone more like Jesus who's had a glimpse and then thinks, well, I've got it figured out now. Why change? Why do any work? It's kind of a in between 2, isn't it? And what's the final stage? It's a functioning, but it's not a functioning of self in a higher way for yourself. It's more of a functioning of self to others. So definitely above number 9, so it's in the right place, but sounds more like riding the ox. So this sounds like riding the llama, doesn't it? But you've gone from the first level of dialectic mastery, where you can hum the rustic tune of the woodsman and play the simple songs of the village children. You can use your hand beats, measure the hand beats, with hand beats the pulsating harmony and direct the endless rhythm. Anyone who hears your anyone who hears this melody will join you. Creating a fresh breeze as you go, helping others with their problems while you yourself not being tempted, and keeping your state of mind on the whole, gazing upwards, not being directed to the drama and ignorance of ignorant people. Seems to be a transition of this, an upgrade of that. You're helping even fishmongers and innkeepers. So anyone, not just people who might be more receptive to learning, anyone. Well, I suppose they'd have to still be receptive. His mental panorama has disappeared. What does that mean? You're not looking up to, your gaze isn't upwards. So understand the first level of understanding, your state of mind on your glimpse or imagination or experience of the whole while relating beneficially to people. Your mental panorama has disappeared. You go your own way. Sounds like a combination of 6 and 7. 7 is you're free of your problems. There is no two-ness. I've reached home. I am serene, in blissful repose. I don't need the method anymore. Trap isn't needed anymore. My mind is my primal nature. Alone and serene. Well, this is better than that because you're actually functioning, but The disappearance of your mental panorama sounds like someone who's completed their work, which would be the seventh ox or the paradigm, the last activity cause. But it sounds more like, really lending to our hypotheses that these two additional ox-earning pictures added later seems to be observations of someone from a different tradition after the glimpse in their problem, or having gained some level of mastery of the second stage of dialectic and able to function. In the now, without having to gaze upward to the heavens, having some success, or maybe even the complete removal of the attachment to mind, relating instead to that higher cognitive function of self, or that state of self. So what have we got? Seems like we're missing the seventh stage of enlightenment, the glimpse. We have a description from a different tradition, perhaps, or an observation, maybe. So this is what Socrates might talk to Buddha about. Hey, Buddha, where did you get these extra these last ox-herding pictures? They seem a bit different. Are they really part of your tradition? Or they're an observation from someone else? Of someone else? And hey, it's your book. Yeah. Someone had this, went on this journey and met this philosopher and we blah, 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 blah. Oh. What would that glimpse be like that you haven't described? Now, hey, by the way, were you describing what it looks like when someone is in a problem, alone, given up? Not given up, but why have not yet mastered the understanding required to say why it's worth it? What will be the end goal of the activity? So it's not someone in your tradition struggling with that problem. You're just observing someone in a problem. So let's further outline the eighth stage of enlightenment by asking the sort of question. Let's say that person alone in his ox after that glimpse is talking to that second class of dialectician and is still doing dream analysis. Let's add that ox-herding picture in. Hey, by the way, because of this big talk we've had in the first part of this book, Buddha, can we understand why he might be blocked from functioning or showing the self? And may have misunderstood it as meaningless emptiness. And what was the point? He has a language of a lower cognitive function he's mistakenly applying to the higher, and because he's attached to that, because he hasn't addressed the principle of pathologos, the 10th hypothesis of Parmenides. When he starts to realize that all problems comes from a identity with any experience, not just our false beliefs and images, but any experience identifying with self. So the tragedy of that penultimate enlightenment is if you think that's reality, or the ultimate reality. When he starts to see that by talking with a dialectician and having some success, that's the 9th stage of enlightenment. Let's add that in. So he's not just a sad, lonely man. He's starting to recognize why he thought that way. As he gains success over that and starts to have success and gain an understanding, he can himself learn that logos we've been talking about today and even guide that reflection. He's gained a mastery of the higher kind of dialectic. Can we add some extra terms into what you might describe as the appearance? Someone dust covered, someone naked of breast and bare of foot. Juicy breasts, apparently, according to my soundboard. Gooners.
Goon, 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 goon.
Going out with his gourd of alcohol and coming back all dusty on his staff, having a full day. Oh, and it's a very interesting description of someone, of what it might appear, or how Socrates might appear to the many. But let's gain an understanding of that specific kind of dialectic to really flesh out this 10th stage of Enlightenment Buddha. And he's relating to all people, even fishmongers and innkeepers, which is a euphemism for hookers and pimps and murderers, because fishmongers have to kill animals, and innkeepers back in that day, well, you get the idea. You say his mental panorama has been cleared. So the ideal that he might be referring to when he helps these two kinds of people here and here, or back over with those struggling with their ox, or even earlier with ignorance in the first two ox-herding pictures, either way, a complete freedom or clarity or purity of mind, free of the mental panorama. Hey Buddha, says Socrates in your book, shouldn't we better outline that cause like you did in the 7th ox-herding picture as the paradigm of a person completely free from false attachment to any pathologos, including peak experiences? Free or of identity with even intuitive intelligence, any self-identity with even that, even recognizing that. Now there are people who laugh at that kind of problem. Ha 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 ha, they say this. What a tragedy, enlightenment. The joke being, it's the greatest experience, and you recognize yourself in there, and you're way more enlightened than everyone else. But the tragedy is, it's so powerful and strong, you may identify with it, keeping you stuck in the second hypothesis of nous or knowing, which is a tragedy. Therefore, the tragedy of enlightenment. Ha 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 ha. Therefore, you have to understand the 10th ox-herding picture, the principle of pathologos. While Parmenides says to Socrates, hey, you won't reach knowledge unless you recognize you're using a language of the physical world which doesn't apply to truth and knowing. You have to learn the dialectic to make the passage from physical experience of adjectives to ousia, mind experience of substantives. But you also have to be on lookout of any of these kinds of human ignorance that tells you can't know. Now, the pathologos category, or the category of the 4 kinds of human problems, human psychic problems of psyche, that's this one, the opposition of mind. It's also the highest of all problems to have. It's the best one, because at least it leaves open the possibility for loving understanding. Unlike Abrahamics or Zoroastrians, or people who think good guys, bad guys, or punishment is ever okay, or violence is ever okay. But in principle, every single one of these opposes knowledge, because they even oppose the lower stages as well as knowledge. So he's saying, hey, for you to reach knowledge, you have to, number 1, purify the lesser use of logos, learn the dialectic, which is the understanding art to make the transition, to learn that higher language. So let go of that lower cognitive function, perfect your understanding, and purify any of these pathologos. In a similar way, if Socrates came back to Parmenides 20 years later, having reached that, he would say the same thing. You have to let go of this lower cognitive function, intuitive intelligence, perfect your understanding in this second kind of dialectic, the higher kind of dialectic, and purify anything that opposes it, which is the only thing left to oppose it isn't specific beliefs, but pathologos itself. Addressing even the principle of pathologos and purifying any identification of self with any kind of experience. Therefore, this freedom of one's internal panorama of mind sounds like, the paradigmatic cause or the model, or like the seventh oxherding picture, someone freed, purified from their problems, but not just their problems, from problems itself, or problem self, which is funny because we want to get to the self, we have to get rid of problems self. So that's someone freed from even attachment to intuitive intelligence and the eidos in mind, recognizing even that is a reflection and shadow of the self. That's the higher paradigm or ideal self, free from those problems experienced as the man who's like, what the hell was the point? That the dialectician relates to when he helps midwife them. So Socrates might say to Buddha, hey, you sound like you're describing someone here functioning in the marketplace to others. And you mentioned a mind free of a mental panorama. Let's break that freedom down to its own stage of enlightenment, because there might be people in the marketplace doing well and helping even people who've had enlightenment experiences who may not themselves have completely mastered the pathologos. They may be still working on that. Because this functioning stage is a necessary element for your own freedom. So, as we've seen earlier, going through addressing your own problems and solving your own problems in the second and third stage of enlightenment, to completely free your problems, you have to actually be a midwife yourself. You have to share it with others. That's of the four aspects of the dialectic: reading and applying the dialectic to your reading to know the truth, midwifery, dream analysis, and sharing it, writing dialogues or being a midwife yourself. Only when there's a certain level of, I've heard it said this way. There's a certain insight into the humanness part that you only gain by functioning as a midwife yourself, necessary for your freedom of your pathologos. So this ideal free from the mental panorama should be its own different stage, Socrates said to Buddha. So let's break down your 10th oxherding picture into two different stages, because it sounds like you are inferring this from observing someone like Socrates. Maybe you saw me in the marketplace, without recognizing that I've gone through two different stages. So this might be the 9th. This might be the closest to the 10th. It's a little bit of this one in here. Maybe a little bit of insight into the source in here. But what are we missing? The final stage of enlightenment. That for the sake of which would be going back to our puzzle in Parmenides that we've been carrying for many, many weeks. Why is there a model an activity or an ousia and logos of the lower realm of physical of mind, but only one hypothesis of Parmenides. And Socrates says, hey, the activity that gives rise to mind we call Chronos, and it has a source, Uranos. So Socrates gave us a hint. What we get in the first hypothesis of Parmenides is a description of the logos to demonstrate the dialectic. Not an account of what it's like to know the self, nor an account of the higher functioning. And what's that for the sake of which? You would turn to what you had as a glimpse, or an experience, or ousia, having mastered that transition through understanding, so that when you go back to that glimpse, you can see, I had it said this way, there's something in the corner to be seen that the Buddhists miss. To see the inherent intelligibility of what you formerly thought as emptiness, you just didn't have a language for it. Or, as we've been saying, a more full participation in self, seeing of the inherent logos, and what's the problem in the ninth oxiding picture? Why go through? I might as well have been deaf and blind. Just sit in my house with the bears, or sit in the forest with the bears. Who cares? That's some bars. Sit in the forest with the bears, because really, who cares? No. Bad.
They're a weirdo.
Sorry.
The woman? Ugh.
Hey, don't say that about her.
What is this? The damn Opie and Anthony? Okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's like the Opie Anthony show up in here. Why? What's that for the sake of which that the ninth oxiding picture had a problem with? With that more full participation or ousia, having purified from the pathologos itself as a principle, seeing the inherent logos as a result of riding the Lama, functioning that high dialectical way, you can bring the two together in a unification of ousia and logos in that higher dimensional intelligence, which we are calling the fifth dimension. If that for the sake of which in the eighth oxiding picture is the fourth dimensional intuitive intelligence that Socrates describes, divination, intuitive intelligence. So too, we can anticipate beyond that a fifth dimensional intelligence unifying Chronos and Uranos, or the ousia and logos, or the experience or state of self with its functioning. That for the sake of which meaning a higher functioning, not to help those lower, or bringing trees to, not just, see in the eighth ox herding picture, sixth, riding the ox, you could help rustic woodsmen and village children. Now you even bring flowers and trees that have never blossomed. You can help even the most struggling people, even the murderers and pimps and hookers. Not hookers, pimps, let's say. Or, as it said, dead trees become alive. Innkeepers and fishmongers can be led in the way of the Buddha. Because everyone, in principle, will be at one of those stages. Either the transition from beliefs into knowing, or from knowing into self. Dead trees. Withered trees he swiftly brings to blossom, effortlessly, the same way that must be the functioning of, well, how can the dream maker or God or self create 80 billion dreams a night? Must be effortlessly, must be instantaneously, with a high degree of intuitive intelligence at use from a higher cognitive function. So, and you can't observe that. You can observe how they function instrumentally, midwifing and dream analysis, doing midwifery and dream analysis in a higher way. Sure, you can observe that from not within Hellenic. As we've said, necessarily they must not have had these oxiding pictures because you require logos and dialectic, as Socrates outlined and as we have defined and understood for ourselves. You need it. So while you may be able to see someone with their problems or someone functioning well, what you can't see is that free mental panorama or someone in the mean term having some success removing their problems, and you definitely can't see that for the sake of which the 12th stage of enlightenment, or the return to self with more full participation, seeing of the inherent logos, unification of ousia and logos as a result. So there's our answer to our 9th oxiding man. Why go through all that? I might as well have been deaf and blind. To give rise to a higher functioning. You can't see that because it doesn't apply to physical world. It would be the functioning of self in a higher way, which would relate more closely to what Socrates says on his last day in the Phaedo. Hey, there is pure intelligence and people have different levels of experience of that, but there's a surface level. Meet me there, where you'll find better humans who've completed their work here, and gods and spirits or daemons who are your fellow travelers and guides. Meaning, if Socrates has reached there, that for the sake of which is escaping the prison of reincarnation. Why? We've said that this peak experience, penultimate enlightenment, we all have when we die. And the quality of reincarnation, intelligence, and character will be a result of how well we can participate in it. Therefore, these first 6 stages of enlightenment are necessary for everyone. Meaning of life. But also, what we saw in the book, let's read it. Be my lot. No. Lot? No. Space lot? No. Misery. Here we go. Man is a cycle of, and is in a cycle of reincarnation because he's here to learn. Now what we've seen is the ultimate level of learning, well, learning itself we have defined as the dialectic. It's just thinking. It's not a philosophy, it's the philosophy. You need the word the. But what we've said is, yes, understanding solves problems. We know that. Understanding your computer fixes your computer. Understanding mechanics can fix your car. We know that. So therefore, true education and the meaning of life must be to develop the art of understanding human problems and excellence. To go from a sick body to a healthy body and a healthy body to excellent body. But soul. And it is also obviously the meaning of life because what we use as humans is our ability to reflect on ourselves, and we know the most dangerous sadistic fucks in the world never reflect on themselves. That's a problem. The religious and the conservatives and the capitalists never do self-reflection. That's why they do murder so fucking much. And the more intelligent people, the educated people, engage in self-reflection. And logos and understanding. If beliefs are the cause of all human problems, understanding is its solution. We know this. We've gone through this a million times, demonstrated it in many different ways. Therefore, the true art of spirituality, the true art of human beings is the dialectic. But what we've defined as the dialectic is addressing human problems of belief and perfecting excellence or wisdom. That's what we're here to learn. But what we've just demonstrated with the Lama pictures is it's not all of it. There is a higher kind of activity that even the Buddhists can't understand, but can recognize maybe some different people from a different tradition and how they appear to them. Therefore, what we are here to learn must be the dialectic, which must have 2 levels of mastery. Why is that? Would you say that man must learn, what man must learn is how to end the cycle of all clan beliefs, which would require even mastery of the principle of pathologos, and go on to know himself, addressing the principle of pathologos, the 10th hypothesis that opposes the knowing of self. So therefore, for what reason? For what ends? What if before the next reincarnation, the soul might say, no more thanks, I'm rather not be incarnated. To whatever degree the soul is aware that he's facing a life where misery and suffering is its lot, why not pull back and say no? And Socrates goes on to say, we are raised here to fulfill our destiny. The end is everywhere present, the self. To come to know thyself is to realize the nature of reality is divine. Our task is complicated because we seek other goals and have other loyalties. We are here to master our present fate and to seek to fulfill our destiny. The kind of problems we return to again and again are loyalties to other than our sacred goal, the self. Not just our loyalties to our pathologos beliefs, loyalty to anything. So the principle of pathologos has to be addressed. We have talked about the kinds of problems the race of men experiences as they identify with the values of the family clan. Recall one of the mysteries we've discussed. What is it in the transmission of the core beliefs that makes it believable? Okay, so, So, recall one of the mysteries we've discussed is why the child believes something about himself that is false. What is it in the transmission of the core beliefs of the families that makes believable what is false? However, is it not true that in accepting this core belief, it creates a way of being and identity? This identity plays a decisive role in the choice of our next reincarnation. If you haven't addressed pathologos themselves, you will reincarnate. And to address the full range of self-imposed masks is the purpose of man. It's the appearance of excellence. When death arrives, all those who are capable of this kind of learning take what has been learned. So this is what we learn. 2 categories of dialectic. And what has been nurtured into them, into their next life. Whatever is yet to be learned and realized becomes what one must be returned to in another life. Man is as a whole, as a species, is part of this struggle to know thyself. It is a cosmic dance of meaning that ends when there is nothing left to learn. And the race of man ends in that state, no longer of man, but that to which he has joined himself. So the completion of that would be that 12th state of enlightenment, using that dialectic to have passageway from the 8th ox, or the full participation in mind, through to the next level, where we can master the full range of the dialectic, resulting in that for sake of which a higher functioning which is no longer of man. Therefore, if your tradition lacks the logos, Buddhism, you won't be able to recognize that final state because you won't recognize it of man, but that of a higher functioning to which man has joined himself, which is everywhere present and available. It's just a matter of doing this. And so, also in the text, I think extent, to the extent we can participate in that luminosity, determines the character of our next life. Also in this life, the extent to which you can participate in that luminosity determines your character here, how intelligent and providential you can be, but also if we all experience that divine luminosity when we die, to the degree there is a yes, here we go. Upon death, says Socrates, all experience that most brilliant light of being. To the degree one is able to endure that divine luminosity, to that very degree there is a corresponding profound depth or shallowness in one's way of being. In that encounter, they realized what blocked them for a more profound experience was their own fear that they would be extinguished in that awesome fear that you would be extinguished in that awesome and powerful presence of luminosity. So, what started as a glimpse in the first stage of enlightenment, you fear you lose yourself so long as you're attached to a belief or image of yourself. Therefore, the need to address your unhealthy tendencies and solve your problems in dream analysis and midwifery, master being a midwife or dialectician yourself, and free yourself from that self-identification so you can return to that luminosity and not be afraid of losing yourself because you're not falsely identified with anything other than that. Allowing you to fully endure it. The extent to which you can fully endure it, the better the character of incarnation you can be, either in this life, reincarnation in every moment you could say, your state of being here, and in your next life. Therefore, the meaning of life is to address your false problems and fully participate in that luminosity, awakening that intuitive intelligence, making sure your next reincarnation will be of a good kind. But if you're still reincarnating, you're still going to have to develop ignorance and go through all that shit again. Meaning, just as Socrates says, we need Hermes to go through that as a passageway. So too, as we just read, what if we recognize that, and that training of going through that eighth ox as a passageway to know the self is necessary for the next level of learning we're here to do, the next level of work we're here to do, master the higher functioning of the dialectic or understanding, so that we don't even identify with that luminosity, but recognize even that's an illusion. So not for a more full participation by removing any identity that's different from that, even removing identification with that luminosity or mind itself. Awakening the next 6 stages of enlightenment, or the Lama pictures. Also being the meaning of life, because if you've got any brains in your head, you won't want to get reincarnated to have to go through ignorance and suffering and injustice and hoping that you won't do too much injustice or won't get murdered along the way, or even participating in truth. That's dangerous because people don't like understanders, as they killed Socrates. Rolling the dice again. That you may happen upon a philosopher in your next life and you happen to pay attention to them. And that's fucking rare. In other words, the meaning of life isn't just to purify your false beliefs, but purify any idea of pathologos and development of that logos, including the higher way of logos and dialectic, so you can pass through that to the self. And just as you may fear extinguishing yourself in that, like it says in the 8th ox herding picture, even a snowflake would be extinguished in that luminosity, removing that, hey, full participation in that luminosity requires removing of that snowflake identification. So too, encountering emptiness, of course you'll be afraid of losing the self. There's nothing there. And if the self is the ultimate and our purpose and our driving force, of course encountering what seems to be emptiness, if you haven't developed this higher kind of understanding, you'll be afraid of it. You won't want to participate in it. In other words, you won't go through the luminosity when you die and escape the cycle of reincarnation into ignorance and having to learn more and more again. Unless you've addressed that fear of extinguishing yourself in nothingness by realizing it's not nothingness, it's not no whole of parts, no whole and no parts, it's no whole of parts, it's a whole that transcends parts, but has an inherent logos that allows it to be better than parts, transcending parts, as the cause of parts. So parts are inherent in it in some way, in a much higher way. in a whole that transcends even parts, but uses a whole of parts as the paradigm for creation. It's not an emptiness, it's a transcendence. Therefore, the meaning of life is not just to overcome your individual personal beliefs and develop wisdom, it's to develop the next kind of functioning of understanding or dialectic. So you can know the self and show the self, function with it, know and show, so that you can complete your work here and join Socrates and the daemons and gods and other better human beings than you find in here, Socrates, to quote Socrates, that have got a better, greater adventure on ahead of them, fellow guides and travelers. Or as Jesus says, what if you recognize that, misery is your lot? What if you recognize that whatever life you are facing in the physical reincarnation, misery and suffering will be part of your lot. Why not pull back and say, no, I'd rather not reincarnate. I'm not just going to go through this again. I'm going to go through the passageway of luminosity to its cause, the self. And when I experience emptiness, I'm going to have a sparkle in my eye and the logos in my back pocket, and recognize, nope, this is an emptiness. This is a whole that transcends parts. It's just not what I'm used to. But again, I became used to it because I learned how to be that higher kind of dialectician. Therefore, this is the ultimate meaning of life. The last Lama picture, or the 12th stage of enlightenment? Giving birth to that unification of the knowing and showing of the self, the ousia and logos, the chronos and Uranus of self, as that higher functioning or fifth dimensional intelligence, allowing you to not only be free of not just this life's problems themselves, pathologos themselves, and the prison of reincarnation. The chains of problems and the prison of reincarnation, to quote Socrates in the Phaedo. So therefore, our meaning of life requires us to write this book where Socrates talks to Buddha and takes his 2 observations of the 9th and 10th oxiding picture, help Buddha reflect on what he already has, the 6 stages from the glimpse, the 4 activities, and the return to that glimpse, that for the sake of which, but apply it to this. So realize, hey, all of that is fantastic, but is still a metaphor for your learning. So let's expand your 9th and 10th oxiding pictures into the 6 Lama pictures. Because you can't observe that for the sake of which, because it's literally a higher dimension. You can observe him in the marketplace, functioning in the 10th level, the instrumental cause, guiding anyone, just as you can observe someone at the first activity course alone with their problems. Desperately needing a higher kind of dialectician. So therefore, you need to write the next. We have a working hypothesis of what the 9th and 10th oxiding picture are, that they may be observations, because it's a tradition that lacks the dialectic and logos, but thanks to you coming along with 200 episodes, you have some understanding and dialectic and logos, allowing you to do your intended function, the meaning of life, write the sequel to the dialogue, putting together your own experience from logos, addressing pathologos, dream work, and the final stage, writing, like you in the marketplace, that anyone can read, even fishmongers and innkeepers can read your sequel. Outlining the next 6 oxiding pictures instead of those last 2. Not from observation, but from understanding, which is again required Hermes. Outlining the ultimate meaning of life and ultimate stage of enlightenment, and how it's necessary for escaping the prison of reincarnation. where suffering and misery will be your lot, or part of it at least. Until you do your work. Is doing your job, learning what we're here to learn through understanding. That for the sake of which, returning with an understanding to recognize what was in the self, full of participation in self, to unify the knowing and showing of the ousia and logos of self, and that for the sake of which a higher functioning. So why go through this activity just to return to self? To learn a skill and an art to take with you in your back pocket. To not only escape reincarnation, but to play a higher game with Socrates and those better men who have done that job, completed their work. Was it worth doing? Understanding the ultimate meaning of life, distinguishing penultimate enlightenment from enlightenment, seeing why it was necessary to complete the puzzle of Parmenides, and add what we've been learning from that and this book to the oxiding pictures, to bring truth and humanness together, to understand the ultimate learning we're here to do and why it's so important and necessary, allowing you to fulfill your purpose. Was it worth it? Yes.
I'm eating the testicles of this bull,
testicles.
and I'm eating it raw.
That's old philosophy. That's Joe Rogan philosophy, eating a testicle.
Bull testicles. Bull testicles.
I know, bull testicles. But was this fun?
If you don't know, now you know.
That's funny.
It was funny and funny. Fun and funny.
I have a sickness for the thickness.
And also, you're a goon.
Some goons and some gooners and some weirdos.
Was it worth it? Was it fun? Now, can we take this working hypotheses and go back to these oxiding pictures and address one more set of oxiding pictures we haven't looked at yet? The author of this book, who happens to be a master dialectician and midwife, did his own version of the 10 oxiding pictures. What might that be like? Someone who's aware of dream analysis, aware of the logos and dialectic, and aware of the pathologos, and has written stuff. We read his book, giving us what we need to fulfill our purpose and meaning of life. Fucking masterpiece. Greatest book ever written? Some are saying. Some are saying. If we recognize that Plato Republic as top 3, and this goes literally beyond it, sees Plato within a hierarchy, Socrates, Pierre Grimes, and Homer above, understanding, being able to understand the problem of Plato had and what's required, similar to the Buddha's problem. If it's better than the Republic, be up there. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Like, sometimes I feel like we have Michael Jordan, the best. We're talking to Michael Jordan, the best basketball player ever, in a world where no one knows what basketball is. The best book, The Meaning of Life. Escaping all problems themselves, your highest functioning, knowing and showing the self, escaping the prison of reincarnation. Where's my 50,000 Twitch viewers? That's okay. It's fun for me and for those who have come on this ride. I hope it's been fun for you. Next time, let's go to these new 10 oxiding pictures and see what's there to be seen. See if we can get any new clues, any new insights. Maybe to what this 5th level intelligence might be. Or what else do we have questions about? What is that higher functioning of self, that for the sake of which? What is the 5th dimensional intelligence? What's the highest category of dream? We've only addressed the 4 activity causes, kinds of dreams. What's the highest kind of dream? What's the art beyond the art of divination? What's the ultimate level or goal of dream mastery? Is it the dream maker? What's the ultimate activity? Well, we're getting close to that one. What's the true seeing without interpretation? What's the highest cognitive function of self? What would it be like to have full mastery over the pathologos? So all of these that are all the goals of the activities. Can we have any new light shined on them from reading the new 10 oxiding pictures? Does it support our theory that 9 and 10 are observations of different stages but need to be fleshed out with the logos? And if it was written by the same author, Maybe he is giving us a bit of a clue and a bit of a guide. If he has written a book, given us what we need to solve the puzzle of the meaning of life and fulfill it, maybe he's added a little bit more clues. It's like completing the Resident Evil. We've completed Resident Evil A with Leon. Now let's go back and do side B with Claire. We've done the ox-herding pictures level A, requiring us to read this book and master this book. Let's go back and do mission B, taking all of that, our hypotheses, our insights, our understanding, and do Claire B. the new translation of the ox-herding pictures. See what clues we get. Oh, it's exciting! I hope you're excited. How your dreams been, by the way? All of these insights into the ultimate state of being, knowing and showing of the self, and how it may relate to the dream maker, and how essential listening to your dreams is for awakening those intuitive intelligence, the penultimate and the ultimate state of enlightenment. Are you paying attention? Has it been weird? Have your dreams changed? Those of you who said, well, I don't dream, have you been setting an alarm every 2 hours and record it into audio without even thinking, whatever comes to mind? Has it helped your training to remember? Well, I hope your dreams are interesting and you take that. Speaking of returning to the self with the logos and dialectic in our back pocket, return to the next episode with some awareness or reflection on your dream in your back pocket and see if it makes a difference. They call this the noblest game.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
The archetype of the hero's journey. That's why we have these drops.
You're a wizard, Harry.
And you're all wizards, Harrys. This is, I don't know, Harry Potter metaphor. A wand or something. I don't know. All right, enough. I will see you in the next one. And I play. Join the Discord. Support the channel if you want to donate. Follow on Twitch. Once I get enough live viewers, I can get affiliate. And I'll see you in the next one.